diversity, social justice to improve student achievement and ensure growth for all. And I will turn it over to Dr. Weber.
Thank you very much, Dr. Matthews. And I believe I have to share screen, my own screen, to get the presentation up. So one moment, please. For those of you who have worked with me in the past, you'll know that I really would rather do this sort of thing with you all. So let me share the screen in a second here, and we'll go ahead and we'll be off. Okay. Wonderful. Now let me make sure my partner, Darby Hoppenstedt, is online and available. Ms. Hoppenstedt, are you out there?
Good evening. Yes, I am.
Wonderful. Thank you. So really, this was a presentation that, frankly, I'd hoped to share more towards the end of August. A presentation really that was rooted in what began with the murder of George Floyd and the events that occurred after.
You muted yourself.
RJ, you have to unmute yourself.
Oh, here, that's the difficulty, I think, with that is if I have earphones in, then it doesn't allow you to come through for whatever reason in a presentation mode. So bear with me because the audio could be a little bit difficult with this particular computer. So this is a story that really wanted to tell at the end of August. In light of what was happening after the murder of George Floyd, we thought it was important to do so. However, was asked to move this up a bit. So we're going to go ahead and Ms. Darby Hoppenstedt and I are going to share the past decade of work that we've done in the Novi Community School District, what we plan on doing going forward, and a little bit of a story to talk about how these things began and why they began. And we look at this as a tremendous opportunity to share with the community the work that we've done and the other opportunities we've had. So let me go ahead and get to the next slide. So I am the Assistant Superintendent of Academics for the Novi Community School District. The picture that you have on the upper left-hand side is really how our relationship with Playworks began, and that's me playing jump rope at the Academy of the Americas Elementary School in Southwest Detroit.
And I'm Darby Hoppenstedt. I'm the Director of Student Support Services.
So really the compelling why of this work and what led us to begin the work is a recognition that while ideas are equal, the opportunities afforded to students in the Novi Community School District were not. We had a Title I audit that occurred in 2009, 2010. Came into the district the second day on the job. I found this audit and it had 27 violations against the Novi Community School District, 6 of which revolved around the fact that we did not have a clear curriculum that parents or students could access. Also a compelling why is conversations with staff, students, and parents around issues of equity. So in 2010 and in 2011, had over 250 conversations with teachers, students, and parents. A common theme that arose is that the demographics of Novi were changing very quickly. However, our teachers felt wholly unprepared to be able to teach as well as they wanted to. So to me, that was a mark of humility on their part. The on-ramp where we began was asking for help. Went to Oakland schools and said, these are the things I see and what we're finding. And that would have been the second week of September of 2010. I was fortunate enough to be given an opportunity to be one of 3 school districts to begin a social justice cohort, a 4-day training. And that was also in conjunction with the University of Michigan. So we jumped at that. Now, for the sake of brevity, I'm going to go ahead and you're going to see pictures on here that tell a story. But because we wanted to and needed to truncate this presentation a little bit. There may be some things dangling out there, pictures that you're wondering what they mean and so on. What I'm hoping is that the board president and superintendent give Ms. Hoppenstedt and I the ability to dig a little bit deeper later on. So on the left-hand side of this, you're going to see our collective leadership and meeting agreements that we have. We use that in the Office of Academics. If you've ever had a meeting with me, you've seen those. And on the right is just a picture that was drawn by Calvin Terrell, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The Arcus Center for Social Justice Leadership in Kalamazoo was actually another part of this origin story, so to speak. I believe in 2012, Ms. Hoppenstedt and I just drove out there and had a conversation with people there around what social justice really meant and what we could do to be a better district with that. In building our constituency support, our community partners such as Oakland Schools, Passon, University of Michigan School of Social Work, University of Michigan Depression Center, Rotary, Novi Public Library, our inter-school councils. And sustainability-wise, we named social justice as a pillar of our community school district at the end of May of 2011. We've demonstrated a yearly commitment to staff and student capacity building. We have a district team of educators to help us lead these efforts, and we have built a multi-tiered system of supports, which again, we'll speak about. Ms. Hoppenstedt will as well. These are again pictures. We've hosted exhibits in the district, race and housing in metropolitan Detroit. This was brought to us by former teacher Seth Furlow and housed at the high school in the right outside the auditorium. On the lower right-hand corner, that's the monument. If you're not familiar with that, that is where we named social justice as a pillar of our community school district, and that's on the lower left. Hadassah came and spoke and about the importance of a name. There's a whole story behind that that we can share as well, perhaps at a later date. So this quote in the upper left-hand corner was a quote that Darby Hoppenstedt, Carol Diglio, and Andy Combe, all employees of the district, saw when we went to a 4-day training by the Great Lakes Equity Center. And this is a quote that means a tremendous amount to me and to so many of us in our community school district. In a world that is unequal across both race and class lines, and in which student populations are increasingly diverse, educators must strive to talk more precisely about which acts help equalize opportunity and for whom. So that would have been in 2014 that we went to that training. On the right side there is a training we did with parents, administrators, and students around anti-racism with Calvin Terrell. Again, going to the right are summer youth dialogues on race and ethnicity, which we'll explain a little bit more about. And then restorative practices is really going to be a linchpin of our work going forward. But I'm proud to say that Andy Combe and Robert Baker, who are in that picture, and myself presented in front of 300 people 2 years ago at Eastern Michigan University about restorative practices and how to integrate restorative practices and circles into schools. So 2010 really was a monumental year in my own life for a lot of reasons, but that Title I audit came, and to me, there was a recognition that our school district could be significantly better. Bobby Murphy was the only person who's on this call who was with me at that time in 2010, and I'll never forget the second board meeting when I came in front of our former school board and told them we're a good district, but we're not a great district. And one of the board members, who's no longer a board member, called the superintendent the next day and asked why they hired me. And I'm okay with that, because we weren't as good as people thought we were then, and I'm proud of who we've become and who we're going to be. So again, here's the monument. This is important on an aligned curriculum, aligned assessment, aligned observation, and aligned instruction story. Oh, Darby, this guy, Roger Fisher. Numbers are convincing and the human story is compelling. Roger Fisher is somebody who was the lead, one of the lead trainers for Darby and I, Ms. Hoppenstedt and I in 2011. University of Michigan intergroup relations, and the point he was making is that, you know, we can talk about the numbers about what we've done, and you're going to hear some of that tonight, what we want to do. But what's really important is the human story. And that has stuck with us and really has been a North Star for when we've worked with students and staff members and parents, is listening to the story and trying to get those stories to come out. So what's critical in this story for us is a guaranteed and viable curriculum for each NCSD student. Remember that we had 27 Title I violations in 2010, 6 of which said we did not have curriculum. That should shock you if you're an educator. It probably doesn't shock you, though, if you know schools and districts and how they work. So in 2011, we began a comprehensive approach to curriculum alignment that is ongoing to this day. It is through this approach that we earned the distinction of being the first district in Michigan with a fully searchable curriculum. You can find that in Atlas. And our approach utilized an inclusive structure that honored staff voice, over 300 teachers working on aligning our curriculum throughout this process. We began that intentional listening effort, and a theme rang out again very clearly. The demographics were changing, and staff members said that we need training into how to better serve students that don't look like us. And I thought that humility was amazing. The staff acknowledged the lack of diversity in the teaching ranks and the need for capacity building around better serving students from a variety of backgrounds. The final point, though, is really one that is of critical import to me, and it really ties into where Ms. Hoppenstedt's going to come in and tell a beautiful story. So some of you know Tracy. Her name was Tracy Cadwell at the time. Tracy Stevenson, former Novi Community School District board member. It was at a passing meeting in 2011 that Ms. Cadwell, an educator, asked me, Mr. Weber, why don't we have a response to intervention plan? Where is it? And I looked her in the eye and I said, Ms. Cadwell, we do not have a response to intervention plan. And we can't have a response to intervention plan because we don't have an aligned curriculum or aligned assessment or aligned evaluation. But I can promise you this, we will. And I am proud to say that because of the efforts of Ms. Hoppenstedt and a whole bunch of people in the school board that's willing to put the money behind it, we built a multi-tiered system of support plan, which is synonymous with RTI, that is envied by many. Ms. Hoppenstedt has been asked to speak to districts around the state to help them build their own plans. And I'm especially proud of that. I'm especially proud of the fact that when I was called out at a passing meeting, that I was able to acknowledge what we didn't have and what we were going to have. Okay, we'll speed this up. Let me look at this. So as you read through these pieces and the community can read them, you're going to see about our aligned curriculum, aligned assessment, aligned observation, aligned instruction. The key to think about, though, if you're not an educator, is if you don't have an aligned curriculum and if you don't have an aligned assessment system, then it's really very, very difficult to build an MTSS system, and it's very difficult to truly approach issues of equity in our district. So why these things are important, again, I just said it, you have to have that alignment. You have to have an ability to measure the progress and struggles that we have. So staff training and opportunities, curriculum capacity building, and curiosity. Here's a picture of Calvin Terrell, amazing individual, really opened a lot of eyes on racism, institutional racism. You know, I can say my own journey in the past 10 years has changed radically, is my own ability to see not only the privilege I have, but the things that we need to do as a community school district to provide opportunities for students. This picture, again, you'll see in the upper left-hand corner, working together with our students around these issues, student dialogues, which you're going to hear about, and then a little survey picture in the lower left is going to be part of our story as well. This commitment to the University of Michigan, you'll see the University of Michigan School of Social Work, that's Dr. Barry Checkaway, amazing man and mentor that Ms. Hoppenstedt and I met in 2011. So I think what's next, and Ms. Hoppenstedt's going to speak to these issues, and this is really for those of you wondering, what is it that you've trained your staff in? What is it that you've went toward? Ms. Hoppenstedt's going to do a fantastic job of really encapsulating that next. Thank you. And Ms. Hoppenstedt, you're just going to have to tell me to switch the slides.
Sure thing. Thanks, Dr. Weber. So I will walk you through the content of staff training. And the first training that you'll see is what we call our social justice capacity building workshops. And that was the partnership that Dr. Weber spoke about with U of M and Oakland schools. And I see this as a foundational learning, to become an anti-racist educator. The work really begins learning about the individual, social identities that exist, such as race, gender, age, ability, religion, and how identities impact us as individuals. And then in turn, how those experiences can intentionally or unintentionally be brought into the classroom. And during this training, there's a focus on stereotypes and the dangers of fixed or overgeneralized beliefs about a group or a class of people, which can turn into bias, which can develop into prejudice, which may lead to discrimination, racism, and oppression. Yep, stay on that slide, please. And staff also learn about the concepts like microaggressions and the harm they cause our students and staff. And then I want to point out the LARA method. That is really a method that helps individuals practice the art of active listening rather than listening to respond. So it's important to be able to dialogue and listen to each other. And the LARA method of listening, affirming, responding, and adding is a method that is taught. Also, handling classroom incidences, which helps staff with the skills to effectively address situations that may arise. Okay, you can click. Thank you. The next training that we offered, so after staff went through the social justice capacity building training, they were hungry for more. And so we collaborated with U of M to offer training that builds upon what they learned at an advanced level. Participants were able to spend time considering our systems within the district and how to break down barriers that exist for marginalized groups. Next. And you can see more of the focus for Social Justice 401. Okay, next. Okay, so culturally responsive teaching is also a 4-day event, and that has been facilitated by Dr. Jay Marks, who is a consultant at Oakland Schools. The overall focus of this 4-day training is focusing on creating inclusive learning environments and developing and executing multicultural curriculum. And that has been offered both at Oakland Schools and most recently, the last few years, within our school buildings. So, it's difficult at times to get people to, or large groups of people in our district to go to Oakland Schools.
Okay, right, Daddy? He's okay. I think he was just very, very tired.
Yeah. So, someone's on. Okay. So we've been able to bring Dr. Marks to our buildings and provide training for the entire staff, which the building principals that have engaged in this work have been very creative, scheduling wise, to be able to bring Dr. Marks in and have that training. Next. Courageous Conversations About Race is also a 4-day training that we've offered, and it's based on Glenn Singleton's book, Courageous Conversations About Race. There's a more narrow focus specifically on race for this training, and really the broad picture is the intersection of race, power, and privilege. In addition to, and Dr. Marks also facilitated this training, and then he also facilitates a training for staff on educating African American males, and several groups of staff have went through that training as well.
So on this particular slide, we have attached a compendium of our social justice efforts from 2010 to 2020. That is a link that you can click on, and that talks about things that we've attended to from staff, students, community, and our district. Ms. Hoppenstedt, anything you'd like to say to that?
No.
Okay. So this picture from the school that we had, and actually within 30 minutes of our teachers being finished, the woman on the left, her name is Rebecca She is a first grade teacher at Village Oaks Elementary. Ms. Hoffbauer put together this event in which teachers and community members lined up on 10 Mile Road to make sure that our community and our kids know and knew, especially our students of color, that they matter. And to her right is her boss, Dr. Alex O'Feely, who is the principal of Village Oaks Elementary. Here we have just another picture. I think that's Miss Grissinger and her husband. Miss Grissinger is a second grade teacher at Deerfield Elementary. Student opportunities, so many here, and this is really, if you want to get Ms. Hoppenstedt and I into an hour and a half presentation, we could do it for you on just this slide. So proud of our kids here and our students here. If you look at here, just too much to talk about in general. We're going to take you through a couple, but what you're going to see is, you know, whether it's working with the Damon Keith Center for Civil Rights at Wayne State University Law School. Just today, we had 3 of our students lead a 250-person presentation on student agency and student voice for the American Institute of Architects. In January, our students led a presentation to every superintendent in the state of Michigan, and it was just a magic. This picture right here is Impact. Impact is our 2-day professional development that we offer. And if you really, I want you to key in on the agenda. And if you look at student dialogues, which is the second kind of line down on the grid, every single teacher and administrator, over 400, went through a 75-minute capacity building exercise led 100% by our own children and what it's like to be a student in their classrooms. When Ms. Hoppenstedt and I talk about this, people from around the country, their jaws hit the ground. They've never heard anything like it. And so incredibly proud of our students. And this is actually rooted in survey work that was done, which we're going to share with you a little bit, that our students co-created the survey. Our students then took that survey and built professional development opportunities on top of that. The Summer Youth Dialogues on Race and Ethnicity in Metropolitan Detroit. The Novi Community School District has sent 8 years of cohorts to this program. And what this program does is, there'll be an explanation and further slides on it, but it's very, very powerful. And here's a picture of that power happening, where our kids and our students are actually leading real dialogue and constructive dialogue around what it takes to make our schools better. And I can't not compliment Ms. Darby Hoppenstedt for this. Many of the kids you see in this picture are students that she met with tirelessly through the summer to help them prepare. It's pretty scary if you think about it as a student to go ahead and now teach your teachers. I think this slide is very powerful. And this gives you a little taste of the survey that our students built. So the question on this slide is, how many of my teachers, question mark. And then you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this was aimed at middle school, high school. We do give this survey to our 5th and 6th grade students as well. But this gives you an idea from the student participants and the numbers of people who took this, or kids who took this particular survey are on the right. Over 9,000 students have taken this survey. But this slide was used in professional development that our students did with every administrator in the district in 2019 November. Darby, anything you'd like to say to this?
No, thank you.
And pictures again, that event that we did in the upper left-hand corner is after we ended up fish bowling, which fish bowling meant the kids were able to tell their story and we listened. We were able to get in and tell our story and they listened, and then they led dialogue. On the right-hand side is Suniti Makhtar, and she was on the AIA call today. On the lower right, that is students from the Detroit Public Community School District, the Novi Community School District, and the Dearborn Community School District, as we got together to work on the presentation for MASA. In the lower left-hand corner is a group of students preparing for our summer work. More pictures, because I really think it's important that we see the joy in this. And the joy in this is the fact that when we empower our students to step up and to have agency and really allow them to ask questions that might make us feel uncomfortable or push us to think differently about issues, whether it's gender or race or sexuality or religion, that it helps us be a better school district. And what I want you to see in these 3 pictures is the smiles. There were very difficult conversations had in each 3 of these different pieces. And if we believe in our students to help ask those questions and help us be better as adults, we're going to be significantly better off. So staff and community opportunities. Just again, being cognizant of time here, opportunities to build capacity around this. There are many pieces, and perhaps we can come back and speak to this at a later date. Something that's really near and dear to Ms. Hoppenstedt and I's heart is Feed the Need. It's something that we had the good fortune of co-creating. Ms. Hoppenstedt went ahead and pitched this idea to the ministers in Novi and walked out of there. And before we knew it, we were off to the races and helping Rotary create this. And really, it's that simple ethos of what happens when you get together and break bread with each other and you get to learn about each other and who people are, and providing these types of things to close the gaps that are obviously in our society. Communication camp, we can talk about perhaps at a later day. You can read about what it is. I know former president of Passon, Ms. Paula Henry, came and vehemently supported communication camp at a time that our school board was not willing to continue with it. Playworks is an organization that we've engaged with and is going to be a huge part of what we do when we come back to school. And what it does really is it focuses on these issues and aspects of respect, inclusion, healthy play, and healthy community. And what we know is play is that universal language that can bring us together. And we're excited about having Playworks back in the fall. Student dialogues course at the high school. We had a student dialogues course at the high school. Seth Furlow and a number of students built it. It was very successful as far as enrollment. We had many, many people. Unfortunately, we ran into some situations where school board members at the time did not support the course. I do think this video is worth showing, and then we'll go ahead and get ready to close this down, but this will help you understand about restorative practices.
Our world is changing at a breathtaking pace. Social patterns that have long characterized human life are changing dramatically around the globe, diminishing social bonds within families, schools, workplaces, and communities. But humans are hardwired to connect. Just as we need food, shelter, and clothing, we also need strong and meaningful relationships to thrive. With all this in mind, what is restorative practices? Restorative practices is an emerging social science that studies how to strengthen relationships between individuals and within communities. When put into practice, the effects are profound. In schools, students experience greater safety and sense of belonging, resulting in improved behavior, less bullying, and less violence. In workplaces, leaders facilitate direct communication among staff and address conflict as it arises. The result is higher performance, greater accountability, and effective collaboration. In criminal justice, new options allow victims and offenders, friends and family, to repair the emotional harm caused by crime. Throughout our neighborhoods, restorative practices give regular people more voice in the issues that matter most. In a nutshell, restorative practices is the science of relationships and community, where individual daily interactions have a big impact on the world around you, at your job, with young people, and throughout your community. How we relate matters. This video was brought to you by the International Institute for Restorative Practices. To learn more, attend our flagship event, Basic Restorative Practices.
So the important part of restorative practices is really we brought this to the district in 2014. I've had a long-standing relationship with the ACLU, was fortunate enough to get some really amazing people from the ACLU to come speak to our administrators about the school to prison pipeline. We did that in conjunction with Calvin Terrell to help educate our staff about institutional racism and the impacts especially on African-American students. We then worked hard to build restorative practices into our culture at the middle school and train every high school teacher. The restorative practices will be a critical aspect going forward with our plan to address what's happened in the pandemic with our students, as well as issues of race and well-being. We know that it reduces the number of out-of-school suspensions, and we believe each student will benefit from these processes. Now, multi-tiered system of support. Ms. Hoppenstedt's going to speak to this for a bit. I would like to say that the interesting piece of the story is the Novi Educational Foundation supported the inception of Playworks, the inception of our work with Haven, the inception of our work with restorative practices. And so they have been a wonderful partner in helping us to get things moving. So much love to the NEF for that. But as a curriculum geek, what Ms. Hoppenstedt's about to share with you right now, to me, if we really want to talk about the undergirding of social justice, if we really want to talk about the population and life, that we have to provide an equitable opportunity for each student in our system to succeed. And these are not just words or platitudes or whatnot. This is the absolute core of why education is an amazingly liberating tool, and why we chose the term social justice in this district over the term diversity 10 years ago. The term social justice pushes people, in my mind, to think of things like gender, religion, and sexuality, and that are very important. But now let's get into the good stuff here on why I get so excited about the work we're doing in Novi. And I'll say it again, she'll never say it. There is no way this happens without Ms. Hoppenstedt.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. I appreciate that setup. So this is really our equity work, and MTSS is designed to provide students with what they need to be successful, both academically and behaviorally. I have added Michigan Department of Education's description about the framework, but if you'll click Dr. Weber, I will show you our representation for NCSD of our framework. And I won't go into great detail into each tier, but as we move up the triangle, basically we intensify and individualize our supports for students. And you know, I think that most recently, and I'm super proud to say this, that Ms. Adva Ringel, our supervisor for the English Language Development Program, has developed intervention for our English learners. I believe it's the only type of intervention service of its kind in the state. So that has been a beautiful add to the work that we've already been doing, and it adds another layer of support for our English language learners. You can click to the next slide. And so in order to have a robust system, we have to have a continuum of intervention services, and really to close skill gaps that exist and build confidence in our students. Oftentimes students that are 1 or 2 grade levels behind lack the confidence, and they obviously need the work, the individualized support to close the gaps that exist. And this is really, we're focusing on our bottom 30% of students. We also have to have, go ahead. We also have to have human resources in order to support our framework. So we are exceptionally fortunate to have full-time literacy specialists in each building. We have full-time math specialists. This past school year was the first time we had a full continuum math specialist in the district, which is it's amazing. And then I mentioned social workers. And then in addition, the English language teachers that support our English language intervention. We focused heavily on early elementary. You know, our kids come to us in kindergarten with a range of skills. Some can read already, some are not able to identify letters or numbers, and it's important to provide those services as soon as data shows that there's a need. And that's really the beauty of MTSS, is to utilize our assessment system to identify which students are in need and to be able to immediately respond. And I neglected to mention our student support coach, which we hired at our high school. Okay. Dr. Weber. I think he's frozen, maybe.
So, and what I'd like to add to this story is that this is, if you're not an educator, I want you to know that this is unique. If you are an educator, you know how incredible this system is. And this is because we've had school boards and community that support this. I tell my colleagues that we have intervention support K-12, and that support is rooted in assessment that we have deeply embedded, and that our curricular supports tie in with this level of support. And then with the addition of, again, pushing 1/3 of our students are English language learners in the Novi Community School District, building a parallel level support for students who may need more time to help their beautiful ideas come out. This really is a stunning piece of what we do. So we're going to go ahead and let you and everyone know that we will continue to go toward the needs our students have, educationally, emotionally, and physically. We as a district will expand our efforts on race, trauma, student agency, and community discourse. Had we had more time tonight, I would have loved to have shown you how we've already attended to those pieces. But I'll never forget a conversation that Dr. J. Marks had with me in 2011. And it was after he had been doing some professional development in Novi High School, and I heard a couple teachers speak to the fact that when they were leaving the room, well, is there an expectation that we're going to be able to solve all of these issues? And I was really frustrated. And Dr. Marks said, RJ, you're going to go through your entire life really angry if you think that we're going to be able to change everything quickly. And you need to be in this for the long haul. And I really, really appreciate Dr. Many of our school board members currently and over the past who have supported these efforts. We looked around the country, it'd be hard districts that have done this. All that being said, it's not nearly enough. Sorry to bum you out, but we have so much more we can do, so much more we need to do. Think back to that quote about how precisely we talk about who has opportunities and who does not. So I appreciate the time tonight. We're gonna sign off here in a second. I'd like to thank you for your time. Hopefully we'll be afforded more time to speak about this. I live in the community. People find me at the pool. That's no problem. And I'll talk a cup of coffee with anybody at any time who wants to have a substantive, respectful dialogue and genuinely want to speak with an open mind and try to do as well. With that said, I know Darby, you have a few things to say.
So I just wanted to very briefly address, I know that there is the community petition that was brought up, and we'll hear more about that tonight. I'm looking forward to that. Initially I was a bit defensive, but after pausing and thinking about the big picture, I said to myself, this is a coalition of students, parents, and community members who want what I want. They want what Dr. Matthews wants, what Dr. Weber wants. And so many of us in the Novi Community School Districts. And I firmly believe that in time of struggle, there's great opportunity. So coming together with the coalition is an opportunity to further our work. And for that, I am exceptionally grateful. As we've shared, we've done good work around social justice and our anti-racism work. But, as a community school district, we've been, quite progressive. We need to do better, and we can and we will. So as Dr. Weber mentioned, this is a journey, and I think that now there's a greater urgency than ever before, and I'm really just thankful and grateful to be a part of it.
Thank you, Ms. Hoppenstedt. Thank you for all the work you put in as well in the long haul of this. Absolutely, and I want people to know
I think you're freezing up there, Dr. Weber. So we will, we wanted to bring this to the board and as a report tonight. If the board has additional questions, we would encourage you to.
You understand it is not up to, or it's not about you in the sense of those feelings will come. But one of the biggest things that I would say that I've learned is that we need to work on ourselves before we can work on what we need to do going forward with everything. So we have a long way to go. It's absolutely unacceptable that George Floyd, frankly, was murdered for passing a $20 counterfeit bill. And if anybody thinks that the injustices that the Black community or people on the faced are new, these cameras are what has been present in our society for far too long. I cannot wait for the opportunity to get better and to go forward. And the commitment that the Novi Community School District has is to do that beside and with our community. So thank you for your time. If there are any questions from the board, happy to entertain those. I believe we did our very best in truncating what was going to be an hour and a half into about 33 minutes. Thanks.
So we would encourage the board, if you have questions, to reach out to either Dr. Weber or Ms. Hoppenstedt or to myself. And we will bring back some of these topics over the course of this 2021 school year to dive a little deeper with the board into those. So that's our report this evening, Dr. Reskin.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. Dr. Weber and Ms. Hoppenstedt, I would just like to thank you, and I would like to thank you for putting your report together sooner than anticipated. We all know the urgency, and I think that it's really was really great that you could bring that forward. We could begin to tell our story. We know it's the beginning of a journey. I reiterate everything that Darby has said, and we look forward to our Board of Education walking alongside of our community and alongside of our administration as we continue to do and tell our story, but to be better and make changes. So I appreciate that. Next up, we have comments from the audience related to agenda items. Our usual format would be if we were in person, we would fill out a card and come up to the podium with a 5-minute limit. Currently, we have an executive order from the governor that puts us in a Zoom meeting. So we have asked any public comments to be sent through a Google form. I do know that Dr. Matthews has 50 plus comments from the audience tonight. I believe that they will all fall within the 5-minute time frame. I haven't heard that that's going to be an issue. So Dr. Matthews, if you would like to begin and read those to the Board of Education, that would be great.
Thank you, Dr. Reskin. The first comment is from Sharon Trumpy. My family moved to Novi in 2012, guided primarily by our desire to live in a diverse community. When we looked at Novi schools, we were impressed to see classrooms full of Black, brown, and white students from all over the world. We heard about the many languages spoken in Novi homes, 71 according to the current NCSD website. Here we thought was a school district and community that would embrace and support both our sons, one Black and one white. The week we moved here, I met a friendly mom who lived not far from me. When she learned we were new to the area, she told us how much we would love it here. She worked for the school district and her children attended Novi schools. With a big smile on her face, she gestured at my Black son and said, "And no worries, my kids have Black kids in their classes and they don't even mind." I think about this all the time. They don't even mind. Sometimes I feel like this is representative of our overall experience here, a tolerance of diversity. But I'm not asking for my child to be tolerated by the community. I want him to be recognized as a member of the community. I am not interested in whether you have taught your child to be kind to mine despite his Blackness. I want all of our children to learn that Blackness is to be celebrated and that kindness is not kind when it values white comfort over Black dignity. I'm not interested in whether the school district website features a smiling Black child walking into school. I want my child to walk into schools where he sees Black educators and professionals, where he learns that his history is our history, where he reads books not just about Black pain, but about Black excellence, Our Black and brown students are not props, not statistics. Our district's diversity does not insulate us from racism. Instead, it should call us to anti-racism. Now you may be thinking, but Sharon, have you looked at our district goals? They say unity, also equity, diverse, and culturally competent. I am glad for this outspoken commitment to these values. I am thankful for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee and their current 21-day anti-racism challenge. I'm appreciative of the district's work around social justice and mental health, as Dr. Weber and Ms. Hoppenstedt shared with the board tonight. And I am here to boldly tell you the time to do more is now. I am asking that the district recognize that Novi is not immune from racism. If mental health is important to the district, recognize that your Black and brown students' mental health is impacted by daily systemic racism. If social justice is valued in Novi, recognize that there is no justice unless there is justice for all. A commitment to anti-racism will not just benefit my Black child or any other Black and brown children in our schools. All our children will be better for the diverse world around them when they're educated about our true and imperfect history and their ability to make our community even better for all of us. You will hear comments from many community members today. Some of them will speak to specific goals for our district. Some may choose to entrust you with their personal experiences of racism, and some will amplify the voices of others who ask for their stories to be shared with the board anonymously. Board members, administration, community members, you can listen to these voices as an indictment or an invitation. My intent tonight is to issue you an invitation, both an invitation to reflect on all you have already done and an invitation to commit to do more, both an invitation to have pride in the excellent school district you lead and an invitation to recognize that excellence requires continuous work, both an invitation to say that these demands will be challenging and an invitation to recognize your role in meeting these challenges. Thank you for all you have already done for my children and for all the children in Novi. Now come join me, come join us to do even more. The second comment is from Taylor Banks. As an alumni of the Novi Community School District, I am speaking in solidarity with those who signed the petition I present to you now. To Dr. Matthews and members of the Novi Community School District Board, as Novi residents, Novi Community School District alumni, current students, and allies, we as a community condemn the violent acts manifested by systemic anti-Black racism and police brutality in this country. It has been clear for quite some time that dismantling systemic racism must occur at every level of society, including and especially public K-12 education. We are writing to address the ways the NCSD environment harms Black students and students of color, as well as bring attention to the urgent need for social justice and anti-racism K-12 education that has been neglected by NCSD thus far. Various alumni now and in years past have come forward to call out the racism in the NCSD environment, to which NCSD has unacceptably made little response. The K-12 education we received in Novi schools left us woefully unprepared to understand and confront systemic racism in America. Without a thorough K-12 education on systemic inequities and how to tackle them, we continue to send students into the world complicit in, and in some cases, perpetuating these injustices. We cannot let any more graduating classes leave NCSD without an accurate understanding of such historical and existing systemic injustices, how to recognize them, and how to begin dismantling them. And importantly, for Black students going through our schools, we must end the continued racism and injustice of both Novi's achievement gaps and disciplinary system. Therefore, we demand the following immediate actions to be taken by the NCSD School Board. 1, include social justice and equity as the 5th of NCSD's district goals to guide all current and future curriculum and faculty development. 2, release a specific detailed plan to hire and retain teachers of color, specifically Black, Latinx, and Indigenous educators, as well as establish leadership positions at the school board level and at each NCSD school dedicated to social justice, diversity, and equity. 3, plan and implement professional development trainings for all NCSD staff and faculty on anti-racism, tackling implicit bias and racial equity. Ensure that there are specific, safe, and actionable mechanisms put in place for faculty experiencing racism and bias to report it. 4, include courses on social justice, anti-racism, and community organizing in Novi high school curriculum, as well as address anti-racism in every year of K-12 curriculum. 5, review existing world history, U.S. history, and social studies curricula to ensure that NCSD is teaching accurate history that recognizes injustices and is not influenced by white supremacy. 6, release a plan to audit and diversify school library books that students have access to and are assigned to read in class, including expansion to anti-racism texts and more books by authors of color. Release and implement a specific plan to address the achievement gap between Black, Hispanic, and Latinx students as compared to other students as indicated by the top 30, bottom 30 analysis by the Michigan Department of Education. 8, release and implement a specific plan to address the disproportionate and racist disciplinary actions taken against Black students who make up only 8% of the district students, but 27% of the district's out-of-school suspensions, according to ProPublic's 2018 Miseducation Project. End the involvement of the Novi Police Department in NCSD disciplinary actions and address the racism that causes such disproportionate disciplinary action at its root in schools. These demands are to be met at these demands are meant to be the beginning of an ongoing discussion wherein we center the voices of people of color, specifically Black people, to ensure all 8 goals are met efficiently and effectively. Various Novi residents, alumni, and current students welcome the opportunity to work with you to achieve our goals together. Cameron Banks. To the Board of Education and NCSD administration, Taylor Banks just shared with you the text of a petition asking you to hear our voices and to end systemic racism in our schools. I am here to voice my support for this petition and to share the community response to this petition. As of 1 p.m. today, the petition had been signed by 599 people. The majority of the supporters were alumni of Novi schools or current students. About 25% of the supporters were Novi residents and parents, and the remainder of respondents were Novi educators. The names and affiliations of all those who signed the petition will be shared with the Board of Education and the administration via email. In addition to signing the petition, respondents were asked if they had anything they wanted to share anonymously with the administration and the Board of Education. Many Novi students, alumni, and educators have personal experiences of racism, but they do not feel safe in speaking out publicly. One of the ways that those with privilege can take anti-racist action is to lift and elevate the voices of others. Thank you to the parents, community members, and alumni who volunteered to comment tonight to support the petition and to use their privilege to give voice to current students, educators, and others. Thank you to each and every person who bravely shared their story. Board of Education members and administration, thank you for giving your full attention to each of these stories we are entrusting you with tonight. Tara Hurt asked, thanks to all who have been involved in the process of developing Novi's Roar. During unprecedented times for everyone, this is definitely uncharted territory. I plan to listen to the details supporting the email sent previously, but I would like a future opportunity to dialogue with you before making my family's return to school fall option selection. Is that part of your process included in your timeline? Thanks. Nancy Sproul. My name is Nancy Sproul, and I am a Novi resident and parent. From the anti-racism petition, I am speaking on behalf of current Novi high school student who shares this story. In elementary school, I regularly heard lunch ladies tell my Japanese peers that they needed to speak English. The last time I remember learning about Native American history was in 4th grade. I am a senior now. In U.S. history classes, there is a vast misrepresentation of our history. I didn't learn a lot of things that I now know are commonly left out purely for our comfort. On behalf of a Novi resident and educator, I share this response. The need for restorative practices training for all faculty is dire. The interaction staff have with students need to be restorative and trauma sensitive, not punitive and re-traumatizing. Serious PD and trained staff should inhabit all buildings, especially elementary, to support the staff as they interact with an increasingly diverse community during an increasingly traumatic time period. A Novi High School 2020 graduate shared this comment on the petition. Teachers not acknowledging when students say the N-word, pretending they don't hear it. Racism reported to student council advisors and they don't care. Where is the accountability? My friend was called China virus in class when she isn't even Chinese. The teacher did nothing. The kids who said the comment laughed and walked away. From a Novi High School 2008 alum, I share this story. When attending Parkview Elementary in the 90s, I was definitely one of the only Indian kids in school and was bullied mercilessly because of it. The principal at the time was objectively useless and didn't do anything to help the situation. After I went to 5th grade, things got better, but I was never comfortable around those students. The 2015 Novi High School graduate shared this comment on the petition. Before my first day of high school, some older friends, sophomores and juniors, were helping me get acquainted with the building. They showed me shortcuts, the less traveled hallways, places to be and places to avoid. One of those places was named Africa, described as the area where the Black kids hung out before and after school. On behalf of a Novi alum and educator, I share this response. As an educator myself, I would like to see more people of color enter the field of education as K-12 educators, especially in areas that lack certain elements of diversity. From a Novi resident and former NCSD educator, I left NCSD after 4 years of daily microaggressions and the overall racist system that left me feeling unsafe, unwanted, and broken. From Ian Reed Twiss. My name is Ian Reed Twiss. I am pastor of the Holy Cross Episcopal Church in Novi. I'm here in support of the anti-racism petition and lend my voice to those who signed the petition and ask that their story be presented to the Board of Education. A Novi 2012 alum shared this story. We had a section of school called Africa where the African American and Black students were forced to congregate. I, as an Indian woman, had to assimilate to whiteness in order to survive the social spectrum at Novi. Being an athlete and having predominantly white friends meant my voice was silenced. I had coaches tell me they would send me back to India, people calling me Slumdog Millionaire, teachers that mocked my ethnicity and said that they liked me better than other Indian kids because I was more normal and involved in things outside academia. There were constant microaggressions, and when I would speak up about being made fun of or having kids throw out my foreign lunch my mom packed me, I was told I was being a drama queen. The 2019 graduate shared this. I remember clearly the area where the bus drop off at the high school is being referred to as Africa because that is where a large population of Black students would hang out. I never had a non-white teacher the entire time I was in Novi. Only after I went to MSU did I have a Black professor my junior year. A Novi 2013 graduate shared this. My 6th grade teacher at Meadows called Orchard Hills, the elementary school I attended and lived near, ghetto. Even at a young age, I was distraught by this comment. Novi is beautiful because of its diversity. Educators and other leaders in the district need to understand and be extensively trained in DEI plus CRP. A Novi high school student who graduated this year has to say, I remember a math teacher asked me why I wasn't good at math and that I should be because of my ethnicity, Asian. If you look at the high school, majority of groups of kids are segregated into their respective races. My friends and I were bullied for being friends because we don't share the same skin color. This is a problem at Novi and it needs to be addressed. The 2016 Novi High School alum shares this comment. Black students were treated differently. Black girls that were smart were told they act white. Places where Black kids hung out were called Africa. A current student at Novi High School states, although I personally haven't experienced firsthand racism, I've seen a lot of people experience it, and it usually centered on the type of language people use. For example, using the N-word when you are not allowed to, or using the word gay as being synonymous with being lesser. A 2015 Novi High School graduate recalls, during 8th grade on my tour of Novi High School, the area labeled Africa was specifically pointed out. Students made it a point to inform other white students of this nickname. Was it my tour guide's intention to reinforce racism? Probably not. Did this impact my views entering Novi High? Unfortunately, yes. It is time to end the racist culture that exists in the Novi School District. Adrienne Haslam. My name is Adrienne Haslam. I'm a parent of children in the Novi Community School District. I'm here today in support of the anti-racism petition, and I am lifting up the voices of respondents who requested that their words be shared with the Board of Education. A current student at Novi High School writes, I have several, if it's okay for me to share. One, I remember the first time we talked about slavery in school. First grade class of 2022 sat huddled on the carpet in front of the smartboard. I sat next to my two best friends at the time, neither of which still attend Novi schools, one of them being the only Black girl in the grade. We likely latched onto each other for that reason. Until I transferred from my primarily Black public school in the Bronx to primarily white Novi, she was the only one. When we learned the only enslaved individuals were Black, every student in the room turned toward me, my friend, and the only Black boy in the room. For some odd reason, the only Black students of Novi Woods' 2010 first grade batch were in the same class. All eyes were on us. I don't know why. None of my ancestors were slave. I'm a product of immigration. Even at 6, that was something I knew. If the teacher noticed, she didn't say anything. That was the first time I realized that my differences as a Black girl carried over to my schooling. By the way, the glances didn't stop. Even in high school U.S. history, I was a target of unwanted attention. I can't tell you how many times I've had to pull up a matrix trying to ensure that nobody touched my hair. No matter what I did with it, it was the target for wondering eyes and grabby hands. No matter how many times I said no, someone still ended up wrapping their fingers in my braids, knocking my beads together, or making comments on how fluffy or oily my afro was. I clearly remember a girl in 3rd grade yanking my braids 2 or 3 days after I got them done. This may not be common knowledge, but getting cornrows or box braids done is a long, painful process, and even more so for my 8-year-old tender-headed self. I told her not to touch my hair because it still hurt, and on her way back into the classroom, she did it anyway. I had the reputation of being scary, tough black girl to maintain, so I didn't let myself cry. My dad is a jovial person and likes to make lasting impressions on people, no matter how long they know each other. This applies to parent-teacher conferences as well. So I've gotten quite used to teachers mentioning to me the next day how interesting of a person he is. I don't mind it. I do mind when they comment on how good my parents' English is, or say something offhand about their accent. Of course, my parents speak proper English. Everyone in Nigeria speaks English. It's the official language. In slight continuation of that, my name is long and unfamiliar, so I understand people being off-put by it. I know that on the first day of school and with the occasional substitute teacher, there will be stumbling and all eyes will be on me when I interject with the shorter name I've had to adopt to accommodate people's unwillingness to learn my name. It doesn't make it less embarrassing when someone comments that my name is exotic. I can handle beautiful, and even though I have anxiety, I can take being asked how to properly pronounce it or where it's from, but being called exotic is an insult to me. I feel like a bird in a zoo, and it's humiliating. Being a black student in advanced courses is hard. I've done it my whole life, but it's still hard. I get sideways glances because I'm the only one in the room who looks like me. I've heard someone whisper that they think I cheated on my test out. It's hard because everyone expects you to fail, so you're working overtime to prove yourself capable. There's a constant spotlight on me because even more than usual in other people's eyes, I don't belong. And to not do well is to be what others think I should be, but I'm so much more than that. It's difficult to make others see it. Even teachers and counselors have tried to stop me from pushing myself. I didn't realize it first until my mom pointed it out to me, but it was likely because of the preconceived notion that as a black student, I'm not as likely to do well. It feels like everyone else is told to reach for the stars, but I am given the silent reminder that they think it's too high for me. This student had a lot to say. Her other comments will be voiced by Betsy Bodine. Betsy Bodine. My name is Betsy Bodine. I'm a Novi Community School District alum as well as a parent of children in NCSD. I am here in support of the anti-racism petition. I'm using my voice to share the words of a current Novi High School student who responded to the petition. She had many personal experiences of racism to relate. 5 of those stories were submitted to the board by Adrienne Haslam. The student also shared these experiences. Novi Middle School has no black teachers. The only adults black students see are the janitorial staff. What is that supposed to make us feel like? Who are we supposed to look up to or trust? Novi Woods, at the time I attended, had no black teachers. From that young age, you've limited what is supposed to be considered normal. The lack of diversity assigns a silent stereotype that carries over until it's broken by what would then be considered the exception. My teachers are all white except for janitors are normally black, but now there's a black person teaching my class. That's a dangerous idea to enforce and a worse idea to instigate. In 4th grade, we were supposed to sing a song about the Constitution's preamble. The song we used had a rap part to it. The music teacher had us choose collectively as a grade who wanted to do it. Someone brought up the fact that the black boy I mentioned before should do it because he's a good rapper. Mind you, he'd never rapped in front of us before. They only said this because he's black and that's what they expected of him. I don't know what other classes thought, but mine came to a unanimous decision. He's a good rapper because he is black and therefore he should rap. The fact that a system was so well cultivated that it instilled the idea in a group of 9-year-olds scares me to this day. It's likely a state-regulated decision, but until 7th grade, the only time I ever heard about black people in history was because of slavery, Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks. How was I supposed to grow up thinking I could be more than a janitor when I didn't hear anything but oppression and helplessness tacked on to the narrative of my people? Why were their founding fathers so consistently praised when Thomas Jefferson wrote all men are created equal with the same hand he beat and raped slaves with? We learned nothing of other religions until we were 12 or 13. Nobody knew where any countries in Africa were. Some didn't know Africa itself wasn't a country. It came as a shock to some people how much potential lies on the continent. Mansa Musa was unheard of, and I still, to this day, get nasty comments on how my family is only able to afford living in my neighborhood because we're Nigerian scammers, and how my parents grew up in huts and were dirt poor. Having a Eurocentric education does nothing but narrow our horizons. Teach us about powerful BIPOC, that's Black Indigenous People of Color. Teach us about who created algebra. Tell us the truth about Thanksgiving, because we all know it wasn't a friendly feast. Educate us on the corpses on which this nation's foundation was laid, and teach us early. Dismantle stereotypes early. Don't throw in small things like where are you from and say Novi acknowledges diversity. This district is too diverse for its students not to know Indian isn't a language, and pulling your eyes back is ridiculously offensive to those of Southeast Asian descent. I may have gotten carried away, but these were just the things I could think of off the top of my head. Diva Sidar. My name is Diva Sidar. I'm a graduate of Novi Community School District and currently a medical student at Northwestern. I'm speaking out in support of the anti-racism petition and lending my voice to share the stories of petition respondents. A 2017 graduate of Novi High School wrote, I was not even aware as a white student that the area and school fellow students called Africa could be taken as a racial slur. This level of white privilege is astounding and should not be allowed to continue any longer. A 2020 graduate of Novi High School had this to say about the anti-racism petition. To be quite frank, I hope this is seen with the rest of the submissions because it will be quite different. I believe that most of the points made in this article are poor as they are racist in themselves. Why must we read books written by Black authors, hire teachers that are Black, or any other action that supports the Black community simply because they are Black? I completely support the Black Lives Matter movement, however, not the organization. Teachers need to be employed based on merit. This is the final word. It should not have to do with race. I am all for hiring non-white staff as long as they aren't being hired because they are not white. Docs like this are generated by a couple of students and they do not accurately portray the thoughts of the whole student body. However, if anybody disagrees, they are somehow automatically a bigoted racist. Docs like this are scary to people like me who do not think like the machine in America is trying to make them think. Docs like this are far more diverse than our mislabeled systemically racist school district. Another Novi High School alum states, Novi is and always was full of privileged white and Asian, especially South Asian students, who threw around keywords like diversity and intersectionality when they needed to get into university, but are completely silent in the face of actual racial injustice. I know of several Novi alum who have freely thrown around the N-word despite being informed of the implications of using the word. These same students have received IB diplomas from Novi. Over the past few years, I've had the misfortune of attending university with many of these students as well, and saw them grow from being uncivilized rude teens to now young professionals and students entering society with their unchecked and privileged upbringing, further cultivating the detrimental effects of their racism and xenophobia, trickling into the real world through post-grad schools and careers. If Novi truly wants to call themselves a diverse and equitable institution, I call upon the administration to have these very difficult conversations and ensure that repercussions are in place for any students with racist and xenophobic values and comments. I definitely think Novi has fostered a culture where privileged students think they can get away with saying whatever they want and doing the bare minimum for society as long as they can fake it on their applications. I want these students to be held accountable for their actions and to genuinely work on being anti-racist and intolerant of racial injustice within Novi schools and the walls beyond. Audra Holdorf. My name is Audra Holdorf, and I'm a parent of 2 children in NCSD. I'm in support of the petition to end systemic racism in NCSD. I'm also raising up the voices of those who signed the petition and ask that their stories be shared with the Board of Ed. 2010 Novi High School alum stated, very good school. Racism is not an issue in Novi. Keep doing a great job. Thank you. The 2020 Novi High School graduate shared, I was called a terrorist. My headwear was inappropriately touched by another student and was reported to the administration, and only one out of the group of students was held accountable. A Novi resident and alum wrote, I've lived in Novi since 1968, and I'm still here, and I'm still here, put my kids and now my grandkids through Novi schools. Plus I went there and I'm proud of Novi schools for all they've done over the years. A 2016 alum shared, as a student of Novi, I felt that I lacked a lot of education on racism and microaggression. I wish I was taught the impact that ignorance had on minority students. We don't learn anything about racism and how systemic it is. I feel like a lot of the history we are taught is all repeated through one of the grade levels and there's nothing significant to it. I wish we learned how important it is not to use language which was not intended for us, racial slurs, for example, the reality of systemic racism, why exactly did people suddenly leave Detroit, and much more relevant topics such as that. I feel like I was not prepared by Novi at all, and along the way, my ignorance may have unintentionally impacted people in a very negative way. As a minority myself, not Black, I feel like we are not treated respectfully by white students. Microaggressions and stereotypes are beyond normalized, and I feel like an appropriate education would put a stop to that. The Novi educator and resident wrote, lately I've been doing a lot of reading in anti-racism and working within to recognize my own implicit biases. It's imperative that all staff members do this work because without knowing these thoughts, they could harm students. These beliefs that could be unbeknownst to are unjust, and we need to teach ourselves along with our students so that school and life is equitable. We have a pillar of social justice, but I don't see it being attended to. A Novi High School alumni shared, my high school bio teacher told me to go back to my country if I wasn't happy with current politics. Absolutely unacceptable, and yet because he was a teacher, I had no sense of how to react. A Novi resident wrote, all of the items listed on the petition need to be addressed immediately. In the last 2 years, nearly 60 teachers were hired and none were African American. Without these voices, the district continues to spread bad history and does not tell the real history of African Americans. They have had several racially motivated incidents that get swept under the rug is not important. We demand action now, no more lip service on diversity and how the district tries to be equitable. Make changes now. We will not stop until things change. The 2019 graduate of Novi High School writes, teachers and students calling a section of the New Wing Africa, teachers having lower expectations for minority students, students constantly saying slurs, and when things are reported, administration does nothing. Black students are policed way more than any other demographic. Fix it. Another 2019 alum had this to say, upstairs there's an area called Africa, and for the 2 years I was at Novi, I reported it and they didn't do anything. Another situation is dress codes. White girls get to wear whatever length they want, but a Black girl like myself wear just the same thing. I'm either forced to change or go home. Cameron Trumpy. My name is Cameron Trumpy. I'm currently a student at Novi High School. I support the petition to address systemic racism in the Novi Community School District. I'm lending my voice to share the stories of other students who signed the petition and wished for their words to be shared with the Board of Education. One current student wrote, one time I got my hijab pulled off in front of a teacher. I ran to the bathroom crying while she just stood there and did nothing. She didn't report it or anything. The next day, when I went to another teacher and told him what happened, he asked me to forgive him or tell a counselor, meaning he wasn't planning on telling anyone that it happened. This happened at Novi Meadows 3 or 4 years back. Another incident that happened was that I was told to go back to my country in front of a Novi High School history teacher, and she stood there and pretended not to hear it. This happened in the 2019-2020 school year. Going back to my Meadows experience as a hijabi, my teacher always looked at me while reading anything about the Middle East, even though I told him multiple times I'm Asian, Pakistani, and then not from there. To me, this is an example of pure ignorance by that teacher choosing to ignore my corrections. Another incident is that I always felt misunderstood as an Asian American at Novi, which really shouldn't be happening as Novi has such a big Asian population. I always feel like I have to explain my culture and educate the faculty at Novi on how my culture works, and they always seem so ignorant about how the basic Desi culture is, even though it's a school full of Desis. Another current student had this to say. I remember in middle school and in high school, I would have male substitute teachers or just regular teachers, white men, and during class, they would make me feel invalid or make another girl feel invalid or wrong by praising the boys in our class, praising them by talking about how able they are, be more like the boys. I hate that so much. I should, and every other girl should not feel like they're not good enough because they aren't one of the boys. Another student at high school shared, I've been going to the Novi Community School District my whole life, and I was never taught about social racial injustice growing up in school. It is sad that most of my information towards this topic came from sources that were not school related, and I think it's important that kids grow up knowing better in order to help stop the problem. Kids are taught young right from wrong, therefore K-12 sets up a moral code for the rest of their life. Another current high school student wrote, in class, a lot I've been called on to speak on the African-American half of things by teachers and students, and I can't count how many times I've heard slurs at Novi from non-people of color. Another current high school student said, I feel like when I was being taught in history class, there was a lot of times when white supremacy wasn't being pointed out, and some students won't ever learn if it's not from school. A student at Novi High School stated, my 8th grade English teacher had given me a few low grades on my papers throughout the year. Because of her lack of feedback on how to improve my writing skills, my mom wanted to come in and talk with them. When I told them that my mom wanted to come in and meet with them, they refused to meet with her and said because she is an immigrant, she wouldn't understand English. Even though I told them that both of my parents were well educated and went to college, they refused. David Trumpy. I'm a Novi resident and parent of 2 children in Novi schools. I am commenting in support of the petition to end systemic racism in our school district. I'm also here to share the words of Novi residents, alumni, and current students who responded to the petition. The 2012 Novi High School grad recalled it was a long-running joke to describe an area in Novi High where many black students hung out between classes as Africa. White kids were conditioned to be scared of this part of the school, which was, of course, harmless. This is a terrible example of how segregation takes new forms when we're raised to fear black people, our brothers and sisters. I hope today's students of color do not experience racism. Another alum wrote, I have never seen the racial inequalities that were so prevalent around Novi High School. I never saw them because I wasn't taught about them. My place of education severely let me down in my education about racial injustices. They made me believe it was a thing of the far distant past. They ignored the fact that it was going on today in their own schools. Novi Schools needs to do better. A 2011 alum wrote, Novi had a lot of different ethnic minorities, which was good, yet racism was still very present when I attended. In high school, there was an area of the high school where most of the black students hung out and people called it Africa, which honestly I took part in at the time, but as I look back and reflect, I had no idea how hurtful and racist that was. A 2018 graduate of Novi High School shared, I've always felt uncomfortable eating my traditional food because people would always come up and judge me for that based on the smell. The middle school principal made a comment on the field trip to Washington, D.C., how we shouldn't bring smelly food on the bus and brought up a story of some Japanese girls bringing smelly fish. The principal could not have mentioned that story because it should not have mentioned that story because it was like a jab to the Asian community that we have smelly food. After that, a lot of students made fun of Asian culture being smelly. He didn't have to bring that story up because it brought up an opportunity for Asians to be targeted because of his speech. The 2012 graduate stated, while I never faced discrimination myself as a student, one of my most visceral memories of being a student at Novi High School was the designation of a certain area in the school, i.e. Little Africa or the Asian hallway. I can't recall any instance of a teacher correcting students for using those terms. I now live in an area with much less diversity than Novi, and I often speak strongly for increasing diversity, but that has to come with understanding, knowledge, and tolerance, and a willingness to combat internal biases. 2018 Novi High School alum said, my history classes were often not focused enough on the issue of racism and how it is still so prevalent. It's clear that the curriculum is too biased in what they want us to learn. I don't recall learning much, if anything at all, about black movements and leaders such as Malcolm X and the Black Panthers, and yet I know more than would ever be necessary about Mesopotamia and various treaties made in wartime. When taught about the Civil War, the issue of states' rights is emphasized, while we know it was slavery that the states wanted a right to, making the war an issue of slavery. We are taught more about the Confederate leaders and President Lincoln than about black citizens who led movements to earn their own rights. The victories of civil rights movements are glorified and brushed over the fact that systemic racism is still prevalent in our society. In high school, there was an area where black students would often gather between classes and was coined Africa by other students. This was never addressed by the school, even though they must have known about it. Winyu Shi. My name is Winyu Shi, and I'm a Novi High School alum. I am commenting in support of the anti-racism petition. I would also like to share the stories of other petition respondents with the Board of Ed. A 1975 Novi alum wrote, as a resident and graduate of Novi schools, I have witnessed a change for the better celebrating diversity in Novi schools. I'm hoping we continue this forward movement with better curriculum and educational resources to teach our children of inequities and how to change, how to learn to live and enjoy each other's differences, and how to help us move forward together. A local resident wrote, mother of a son who spent his entire year without recess in Novi Meadows, made sure she teacher made sure he was miserable. No actions taken by the administrator despite multiple complaints and many kids switching classes. 2018 grad shared this story. I had to stop riding the bus because black kids were getting beaten to the point of unconsciousness. I also rarely visited my locker as it was in the upper north wing, and that was where most fights broke out, so I didn't exactly feel safe walking through as a small white female. 2015 alumni wrote, in my 4 years in Novi High School, this teacher was the only teacher of color I had. Another alumni responded, when I was at Novi High School, there was a clear social segregation among black and non-black students. By addressing the concerns listed in this petition, all students may be better integrated and better able to learn from each other in order to extinguish any systemic racism. A 2011 graduate remembers in middle school, someone made a fake MySpace with the intent of calling me a slur. Nothing was done about it. A 2013 alumni shares their experience of being told that black people are only supposed to hang out in Africa. A current student at the high school said, people are uneducated about the true history of racism and often use misinformation to guide their beliefs. A 2012 alumni stated, racism was rampant in the halls, with one area of the high school, the hall by the bus drop-off, being named Little Africa. A current student shared, while I haven't personally experienced an extreme story of racism, I know that I felt obligated to act a certain way or speak a certain way to fit the status quo. While there are clubs in place to encourage various cultures, I've always felt a little out of place when demonstrating my culture or dressing a certain way. 2014 graduate said, it's unacceptable that students call a section of Novi High School Africa. This is racist, no question about it. Administration needs to empower the staff to discipline and educate students in response to such microaggressions. And a Novi resident wrote, thank you for this petition. I was just discussing with my husband how we need to use the current climate as the background to write another letter so they can explain why my children are being taught indentured servants for life instead of about slavery and the horrors of it. Nicole Hewer. I'm a resident of Novi and have 2 recent graduates and have 1 child still in NCSD. I believe NCSD to be an amazing experience for students, and yet I know we can be even better. I've been thinking about the current movement of the social justice front and how the world would be a better place if people stood up for the injustices they see, whether it's an everyday citizen, a cop, a teacher, a parent, a student, etc. This made me reflect on my own behavior and some things that I perhaps should have spoken up about before. I've witnessed a teacher be sexist and racist to students. At the time, we were new to the district and I did not want my reputation to be the pot stirrer, nor did I feel I had the credibility to say anything, so I said nothing. I have stories from a specific child about racist tendencies from a different teacher, but because it was just that kid's perspective, I didn't know how to take action on what a child sees. Our society does not always value or believe children's perspectives, even if I value and believe my child. So I said nothing. Instead, I taught my child how to handle working with people in authority who misuse their power. I've heard stories from my kids about racist and sexist things that other students say, but kids will be kids and it is their parents' job to teach them how to behave, so I said nothing. All of these things, I now see that I should have said something, but I didn't. So why didn't I say anything on events that I witnessed or knew about and felt were wrong? I did not raise my hand and tell people who could make a difference in righting a wrong. I'm not proud that I have not always stood up, but I do feel that speaking up is hard. It makes you feel vulnerable, and the risk of possibly not being perceived well or believed is added to the strain. I am an active member in our community and school district. I have great relationships with parents, teachers, and administrators, and I still have said nothing until now. Why? Perhaps it is a personal weakness or fear of how reporting such action could hurt my kids, my family, or me, or perhaps it's a human flaw. I really do not know. What I know is that it needs to change. I believe that if I am not comfortable speaking up, then there are others who are not comfortable as well. I'm thinking about all of this in the context of being anti-racist and anti-sexist and how we need to speak up for others, and I am thinking that speaking up creates a self-vulnerability that can be hard to take on. I know that NCSD has an anonymous tip line. I also know that I do not feel comfortable using that tip line for big issues. That is not fair. I realize as you have provided a process to address the concern, but I am trying to be honest and realistic in approaching this issue because I see that something needs to change. I do think the anonymous tip line is part of the solution. However, I strongly believe that there needs to be more than one way we're trying to tap into this. So what am I asking for? I'm asking that NCSD take a very serious look at institutional racism and sexism within its own constructs. I'm asking for NCSD to seek feedback on these issues to help take away the stigma of speaking up so that people can and will share their experiences in order for NCSD to be a safe place for all students. I'm asking NCSD to think of different ways of reaching parents and kids for feedback on issues that go beyond academia. I know that it is a messy request given that you are a school first, but the reality is we are a community too. We have responsibilities as community members to protect and provide opportunity to all of our members, and we cannot protect them if we do not know where their true fears are. We cannot know what their true fears are without providing a safe and comfortable forum for them to share. A few years back, NCSD started talking about mental health at a time when that was something of a taboo topic. I think we have another taboo topic that we need to break open. This feedback in no way takes away from how great I think our school district and our community are. Social justice is an area where we can be better, and we owe it to our community to try to be better. Thank you for your time, energy, and thought in making NCSD a wonderful community. Jason Haslam. My name is Jason Haslam. I am a Novi resident and parent of children in the Novi Community School District. I am commenting in support of the petition to address systemic racism in NCSD. I'm also lifting up the voices of students, alumni, educators, and residents who share their personal experience of racism to be relayed to the Board of Education. A 2016 graduate wrote, I am sure this has been shared before. However, I'll never forget the designated name of the atrium at the end of the science hall being called Africa. This name created a racial divide by white students of Novi and made those that used it seem of greater popularity and likability by other white students. It was an absolute exploitation of black students at Novi for white students' social gain. It was disgusting and loaded trend that lasted many years and was never formally or officially addressed by faculty and staff despite their exposure to the name in its context. Another alumni remembered, during my time at Novi High School, one of the most influential teachers I encountered was, the name is redacted. As an educator, he engaged the class in meaningful discussion. As a human being, he was sure to encourage the building of good character. I would see him actively in the halls, taking care of litter, engaging with students, and setting the bar for being excellent to one another. A 2017 graduate wrote, my senior year of high school, I signed up for a class called Social Justice Dialogue, ran by, the teacher's name is redacted, and was extremely excited to take this class because, one, you had to apply and be accepted to take it, and two, it touched on a lot of topics that are important and also controversial. The description of the class was, this class aims to increase dialogue on race and ethnicity among high school youth at Novi High School in metropolitan Detroit, one of the most segregated metropolitan areas. This class significantly shifts the dynamic of a normal course in that each student in this course is an expert. The content of the class is our own personal experience, observations, opinions, and emotions. All students are equal members of this community and therefore experts on the experience of race, ethnicity, and issues of social justice within it. Young people representing the demographics of our school community participate in structured intergroup dialogues that focus on race, ethnicity, and other topics around social justice issues. In an increasingly global society, our ability to communicate effectively with those who are different than us about difficult issues is no longer an ideal, but a necessity. Through this course, students will gain the skills they need in order to be able to engage in such dialogue and also have the opportunity to explore issues of interest to them, which was found in the 2015-16 catalog. This class was later canceled, and I did not get the opportunity to take the class. There was not an official reason why it was canceled, but a lot of people speculated it was too political and controversial, which was very frustrating. This class is a perfect example of how Novi needs to step up and address social issues. A class similar to this description would be a great course to add to the required classes in Novi. I know I was extremely excited to take this course because I knew I was going to learn a lot and hear a lot of different opinions and sides. Savaraman Sidar. I'm a parent of a Novi graduate and commenting on support of the petition to end systemic racism in the Novi Community School District. I'm also sharing the responses of those who support the petition and one of their stories related to the Board of Education. A 2010 grad responded, I definitely agree there is work to be done regarding history courses, especially after speaking to students who had other K-12 experiences. It further brings to light what needs to be changed in NCSD. Specifically, a friend who grew up in Philadelphia mentioned how their school system, they offered a Black history course which highlighted the inaccuracies typical U.S. history courses taught. This was never an option in Novi. Additionally, the English courses offered with NCSD also need improvement. It's especially evident within these courses that the students who are in honors are favored, and it almost as if students in non-honors courses are given up on. The non-honors students are never worked up to the honors level. It's more so if you show up for class, you'll pass. All students should be offered the same opportunities to succeed. A recent 2020 Novi High School graduate shared, when the Pledge of Allegiance came on, a substitute teacher who used to work for Novi as an art teacher looked at me funny and told me to stand. I refused. She then proceeded to aggravate me and my black friend next to me, who also decided to sit for the rest of the class period, and eventually writing us up for the teacher the next day. While on her rampage, she expressed that you should stand for the Pledge of Allegiance because it's considered not respectful if you don't. She went on to say that her son or someone in her family was in the Army and they fought for us to stand. She ended that rampage by saying it would be disrespectful if you went to another country and sat when their anthem or pledge was being sung. The teacher never got reprimanded, and I was scolded for not complying to her rules. The 2014 alumni wrote, I spent my entire high school experience knowing there was a section of the high school hallways referred to as Africa because that was where all the black students hung out or had a locker there. I also believe our U.S. history curriculum is in need of major changes. It is extremely whitewashed and mentions almost zero people of color significant U.S. history and barely covers the indigenous people of this country. That goes for all Novi school levels. There should be a specific section in Novi High School curriculum that focuses on systemic racism. Another alumni recalled tons of kids used the term Africa to refer to where African American kids hung out, and no one did anything to stop it. I constantly heard kids make fun of students of different colors, ethnicities, backgrounds, and no one punished them or reprimanded them. A current student at the high school said, I have heard students of color, particularly black students, feeling a lack of acceptance, inclusivity, and having issues with a teacher at Meadows. Instead of fixing things about the teacher, getting rid of her, students are moved to other classes, thus avoiding the real problem of racism in this teacher. Catherine McGuire, I am a Novi resident and parent. I am responding to support the petition asking NCSD to address systemic racism in our schools. I'm also here to speak for students, alumni, educators, and residents who use the petition to share their private experiences of racism. A 2011 alumni wrote, our history and social studies classes often glossed over the hard truths about our country's history and glorified problematic figures, rather than presenting all historical figures as humans who are capable of good and evil actions. We spent so much time focusing on the Christopher Columbus narrative, American Revolution, an overly sanitized version of the Civil War, and selective aspects of World War I and World War II. We didn't learn the hard but necessary facts, details regarding slavery, genocide, brutality of indigenous peoples, Native Americans, other wars, Vietnam, Korea, U.S. involvement in South America and the Middle East, and important low points in our history, Jim Crow laws, redlining, murder, persecution, alongside movements they sparked, civil rights movement, Stonewall, anti-war activists. All of this is necessary for students to learn so they can be better informed citizens and neighbors. Another alumni wrote, I am white, female graduate of Novi High School. I attended Novi schools through K-12, and reflecting back on my time, each school desperately needs change. I would witness acts of the way white teachers would argue with black students. I would watch as the students time and time again would stand up for themselves, and the teacher would usually take them outside of the classroom where we could all hear the teacher raise their voice unprofessionally and eventually escort the student to the principal's office. Looking back, it makes me sad that I sat in silence. It makes me sad that since leaving Novi, I have had to truly be educated on Black history and realize that so much of it is neglected in all of the U.S. history courses taught in NCSD. Novi prides itself on diversity, so why don't you protect it? Why don't you train your teachers better, hire more teachers of color, prove that you are the best school district in Michigan? I was also once involved with a police officer in Novi High after I accidentally bumped into a car in the parking lot. I was 16, scared and ashamed of the incident. I'd waited in the parking lot, left a note, and then drove home. The next day, the officer called me down to the office. He told me there was no note and stated that the damage to the car was entirely worse than what I had explained. It wasn't. I remember. I will never forget how this man slammed his hands down on the desk in front of me as the VP stood by his side. It scares the hell out of me. I was 16. Accidents happen. The low-life officer had clearly never solved any cases before in his life because coming after me for the incident was maybe his greatest achievement. He continued to yell at me for what he could have done since I drove away without leaving a note, but then drastically shifted his mood to, but I just need your insurance information. I was a young girl who just had an officer yell directly in my face, throw his hands down on his desk in front of me. I am white, and I'm not sure how that meeting would have ended if I were black. I hated that officer. It left me with a horrible anxiety every time I saw him in the halls. I knew that he was an angry man. It terrified me. I'm not sure how the black students I attended school with were treated by him, but the thought scares me. Higher, better, and the VP who stood alongside, not caring at all the way the man was literally terrifying me, should be ashamed of himself. Again, this interaction, I assume, was absolutely nothing in comparison to what students of color must endure during their time at Novi. Looking back, he still scares me. I hope he isn't there. The 2015 graduate expressed concern regarding lack of diversity in teaching staff, promotion of white Christianity-centric beliefs by multiple teachers as American-centric, being told by a teacher to read the Bible. Max Schenker. I'm a 2011 alumni of Novi Community School District. I am commenting in support of the anti-racism petition, and I am lending my voice to those who requested that their stories be shared with the Board of Education. 2012 grad wrote, in Novi High School, there was a hallway area of the building that was often referred to as Africa because people would see African-American students hanging out there. I always wondered why this was accepted by students and the current staff because I'm sure that they knew about it too. 2018 alumni recalled, during my sophomore year, Novi High School Student Council planned an American Cultural Day for Homecoming Spirit Week. I wasn't surprised and impressed that this was an event NHS had chosen, but I was happy the school wanted to recognize whatever diversity it had to offer. As an Indian American, I proudly chose to wear a traditional Salwar kameez. While I was walking down the stairs to my first hour, a white male, someone I had interacted with in middle school, walked past me and called me a terrorist under his breath. Shocked, I stopped immediately, whipped my head behind me, and watched as the male sneered at me and ran up the stairs. I remained frozen on the staircase, unsure of what to do. I looked at the people walking in the same direction as me. None of them had stopped. Did I imagine him saying that? How could someone imagine this? Still processing my thoughts, I made my way to my first class and sat dumbfounded for the rest of the hour. Did that really just happen? Why would someone even do that? It was just a small incident. Should I even tell someone? I eventually decided I was overreacting and I decided to do nothing. I often replay this memory in my head, still in disbelief that it occurred. It was only when I got to college that I realized how wrong it was. Yes, it was one seemingly small incident, but it still happened, and it was big to me. I wish I recognized how unfair it was, and I wish I had spoken up and known what to do. I hope that through this initiative, NCSD can create a culture that prevents such incidences from occurring, amplifies student voices, and welcomes diversity within its student body, faculty, and curriculum. A 2015 graduate wrote, section of the school being called Africa, hall monitors blatantly singling out black kids walking in the halls and taking them down to the office, teachers using racial slurs, only one class on social issues fought for by one teacher and a few students. Another resident who signed the petition said, I am a retired teacher. If we want systemic change, we must be proactive in planning and implementing professional development in the area of implicit bias and value the diversity, as well as hiring a racially diverse professional teaching staff. Makina Baus. I'm a Novi School alumni, and I'm commenting to express my support of the petition. I'm also raising up voices of those who signed the petition and ask that their personal stories be presented to the Board of Education. A Novi High School graduate wrote, I remember as I was graduating, there was a hallway people started calling Africa because a lot of African-American students had their lockers there. Throughout my life in Novi, as one of the few Jewish students in the district, I had derogatory terms and jokes made to and about me and was often called on to represent and speak to the Jewish American experience in class, when really it's never fair for students to have to represent an entire multifaceted community. A 2015 graduate wrote simply, Novi was a place of racism and sexism. A 2010 graduate said, I remember a specific storyline that was often reinforced by staff and teachers about the population of black students at NHS. The idea that the families of these students used the same address to appear that they lived in Novi to be able to attend NCSD, even though they were from surrounding areas such as Detroit. While I think the intention was to make students grateful for the good school we were able to attend, the story often created an othering effect on the community of black students at the school. It created division by reinforcing the idea that they were not real Novi residents and set students and teachers alike up to assume these students were inherently not prepared to handle the rigors of school like NHS coming from previous education in Detroit. Another alumni remembered, as a student of color, I felt I had to explain and justify my place in Novi school. I remember distinctly being asked in front of my classmates if I had cheated on my social studies exam when I got 100%. I was the only student ever questioned about getting a top score, and I felt like if I didn't do well in the rest of my tests that I would be seen as a fraud. I felt my teacher expected me to be less than capable than my peers. A current student at the high school said, I was in English class watching the film about video games that is required, and one of my teachers made a remark that rubbed me the wrong way. The main character speaking, as the teacher described, was shady and obviously more manipulative than the other character in the film. To elaborate his claim, the teacher pointed out a woman cleaning dishes in the background of the old restaurant and said, that woman is probably an illegal immigrant, right? He assumed this woman was an immigrant just because of the way she looked and the fact she was doing a dirty job that not many other people wanted to do. He even made a point to say that last part. Depka Uvara. I am commenting in support of the petition to address systemic racism in NCSD. I'm also using my voice to lift up the voices of those who shared their personal stories when signing the petition. They ask that these stories be shared with the Board of Education. A 2016 graduate wrote, when the movie Detroit came out, it was astonishing to me that it was the first time I was learning about race riots. We need to be taught all history, especially when it happened in our own backyard. A Novi resident said simply, my children have graduated from Novi and have seen discrimination here. A student who just graduated from Novi High School this year said the use of the N-word as a joke or while singing along to songs containing the word highlight Novi's lack of emphasis on race relations despite our highly diverse surroundings that require it more than other communities. 2019 graduate wrote the use of the N-word as a joke or while singing to songs containing the word highlight Novi's lack of emphasis on race relations. A 2020 graduate said multiple times I've heard students call others the N-word as a passing greeting. These students were white and when called out decided that it would be great to use the word even more. In upper level classes, I get told there are no black people here because they're not smart enough to be here by multiple classmates. A 2018 alumni remembered how they heard about the racist comments about Little Africa in the Novi High School. A 2019 alumni said, did not learn until high school that Christopher Columbus was not someone who found America, but rather led mass genocide. I've heard students use slurs without being reprimanded. I believe truly that all the above statements can only make Novi a better school district, one that is more diverse and stands in solid. A student who just graduated from high school wrote, in 8th grade, one of my peers asked me when I was going back to India. I am a Michigan native. A 2019 graduate stated, I remember in high school there were parts of the school where mostly black people and another part where mostly Indian people would meet. And I distinctly remember those areas being known as Africa and India and some jokes being made about it, which is not okay. This is number 26 of 61. Seal Zong. I am a Novi High School 2019 graduate, and I am commenting in support of the anti-racism, in support to anti-racism in Novi Community School District. I'm also lending my voice to elevate the words of students, alumni, educators, and residents who signed the petition and requested that their personal stories be shared with the Board of Ed. A 2019 alumni said, in elementary school, I was laughed at for what I brought to lunch. In middle school, I was laughed at for what I wore. In high school, I was laughed at for how I spoke. In each school, there was always a way for people to make fun of me based on my ethnicity and how it affected my personal life and values. These people also got away with it because it would be characterized as just jokes. A current Novi student wrote, I had gone to NCSD since I was 8, and I really enjoy going to Novi schools. However, I experienced direct and indirect racism while going to Novi schools. My first experience was when I was in 5th grade and my teacher was giving a lesson about George Washington. My teacher and other students were speaking about George Washington in a very positive way, and it kind of bothered me. So I brought up the point George Washington was a slave owner. My teacher said something I'll never forget. Maybe George Washington was a good slave owner. There's no such thing as a good slave owner. Another experience I had when I was in 8th grade, I was one of the few black students who rode my bus. Quite a few of the male Indian and Caucasian counterparts would pick on me. They would say things to me like, I know your mom is poor because she's black, or getting into college won't be easy because you're black. They also used the N-word in front of me multiple times. They'd also make jokes saying I ate fried chicken and watermelon. I came home upset every day for a year. I would tell my dad about it all the time, and he got sick of it. He reported the incidents to administration. I was called to counseling. I told them everything. None of the people on my bus were reprimanded, and as soon as I got on the bus that day, they said, we never said the N-word or any of that stuff, and even if we did, you were the only person who had a problem with it. What made it even worse is black students, especially those who aren't as affluent, will be reprimanded harshly with our second thought, but students of color of different races will be given multiple chances. I've been given chances I have been given chances myself, but it's mainly because my family is upper middle class and is very involved. I'm asking you all to hold teachers and students more accountable when it comes to race. We as a community need to have an honest conversation and make a change so students won't go through these types of experiences. I really love going to Novi, and I've had an overwhelmingly good experience, but my few experiences with direct and indirect racism have affected my life in a big way. 2017 graduate remembered, my sophomore year, I was approached by a teacher about participating in a social justice program through the University of Michigan. Upon my completion, during the following school year, I was invited to attend a social justice initiative held by NCSD. The program was inevitably canceled because the school board did not see the importance of spending money on and staffing this retreat. NCSD has continually suppressed the sharing of ideas, voices of BIPOC, and conversation regarding all social issues, including racism. Throughout my time at NCSD, I was failed in my education and was taught whitewashed history, not given enough opportunity to read books from authors of color, and had very few teachers of color during my K-12 years. This is 27 of 61. Sneha Rajan. I'm a member of the Novi High School graduating class of 2015. I am commenting in support of the petition to address systemic racism in Novi schools. I'm submitting on the behalf of those who signed the petition and requested that their experiences be relayed to the Board of Education. A Novi resident shared, my middle son talks about history class on slavery where the term wasn't used. Instead, they used the phrase indentured servitude for life. The curriculum must be more truth and anti-racist in its teachings. A 2010 graduate recalls, when I was in high school, there were hallways called Africa because that is where the majority of African Americans had their lockers. Not sure why Novi had all the African American lockers together. Race should not determine where someone's locker is. The 2013 alumni wrote, I remember the racist nicknames students had for the areas of my school. One area where all the lockers meet was referred to as Africa because that's where all the black students hang out. One area of the school in the old wing is referred to as China Asia because that's where the Asian kids hang out. Students would use these nicknames to describe things. It was so well known, I would be very surprised if at least some teachers were not aware of this. For example, where is Mr., Mrs., Miss X's classroom? Oh, it's the one right next to Africa. A 2018 alum remembered, in 6th grade, we read Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry as a class. My teacher gave us a whole speech about how she would be using the N-word and that we all needed to be okay with hearing it. I recently learned that other teachers did not use the N-word. I grew up thinking this was normal and that every other student in America was hearing their white teacher say the N-word. Turns out I was wrong. A student who graduated in 2019 shared, I was called a racial slur by another student. Another 2019 alumni wrote, things such as all the Asians are getting into U of M, no one else. Wow, you're smart and you're not even Asian. And worst of all, the upper common area of Novi High School was commonly known as Africa throughout entire high school. This is unacceptable. 28 of 61, Sydney Harding. I am commenting to support the petition to address systemic racism in the Novi Community School District. I'm a 2012 alumni of Novi High School. I'm also here to share the stories of the students, alumni, educators, and residents who signed the petition and ask that their experiences be brought in front of the Board of Education. A 2019 graduate remembered, when I was in 6th grade, my teacher thought I had drawn all over my hands and made it a point to call me out in front of the entire class, scolding me without realizing that I have henna, a traditional Indian cultural temporary tattoo on my hand. Not only did the teacher embarrass me in front of my classmates, but she showed complete, utter disregard for the cultural diversity among students throughout my 6th grade year. A 2011 alumni wrote, systemic racism is an insidious process that is built into the institutions that have long existed within our society. Sadly, the Novi Community School District, though exceptional, is not an exception. This ingrained institutional racism must be addressed. It's not as obvious as overt racist acts directed towards people of non-dominant races and cultures within our community acts that, when seen, can be called out. Rather, it is a system of rules, policies, and passive biases that maintain the status quo. To those who are part of the in-group, the dominant culture, so to speak, the status quo has been working for you. These are problems that perhaps you have not seen and have not affected you or your family. They have, however, impacted people within our community that have neither as loud a voice nor the power to change these systems as most represented on the NCSD school board. We need to change the way in which we address these problems. Passively calling it out when we see it is absolutely not enough. Instead, acted changes to make NCSD anti-racist. I, for one, cannot believe that in my time from 2nd through 12th grade in Novi, I had no black teachers, despite the obvious need to have a diverse set of role models. I really believe in the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. I had many good opportunities given to me during my time in NCSD, which have set me up to achieve many of my goals in life. I wish these opportunities were accessible to all students in our school districts, including those without the historical representation. Moving towards an anti-racist society must start in our schools, the first of many gatekeepers in social mobility. A 2018 alumni reported being underestimated and discouraged by counselors and teachers when I would share my goals and seek opportunities to advance. The segregation of black children in special education classes with little progress to regular education due to the underestimation rooted in bias. 29 of 61, Tiara Turner. I am a Novi resident commenting in support of the petition to address systemic racism in our schools. I would also like to lend my voice to share the stories of other supporters. A Novi educator wrote, students calling a certain area of NHS a name based on the students who hang out there, hearing students of color stories regarding their racist experience at NHS. We lack diversity, as many schools do in our staff, but it's not as easy as just hiring people of color, as there are less and less overall people going into the profession, and the whole profession is desperate for any teachers. So how can we better help to recruit and retain teachers of color and encourage our students, especially those of color, to be teachers or leaders and in all professions and empowered to do so in a system that has oppressed them outside of their schooling and influenced their lives? A current student shared, this is not a story per se, but I want to say that our history classes always sugarcoat such serious topics. This defeats the purpose of our learning. A member of the class of 2017 said, we have a social justice class that was taken away and my artwork had a swastika etched into it permanently. A 2014 alum wrote, I was asked to test out of the ESL program despite having been in Novi schools my entire childhood. I believe I was in 3rd or 4th grade already and remember being confused why I was asked to. I'm Chinese American. No discussions about what microaggressions are. We had to learn and name them ourselves. Another alumni said, I was always frustrated at the lack of diverse reading material in the English curriculum. However, I appreciated the inclusion of diverse materials in AP Lit. A response from a 2014 graduate said, I remember the bus circle being called Africa because many black students would hang out there. I'm not sure if the school admin or faculty were aware of these racist comments, but it's something that I heard when attending from 2010 to 2014. 2010 alumni wrote, I was told by my U.S. history teacher that I could not possibly be 100% Indian heritage, as the British colonized India for a couple of hundred years. I found this to be incredibly demeaning and distasteful, and I was not in an environment where I felt I could speak up about that. This incident has stuck with me for nearly 14 years later. A recent graduate of the class of 2020 wrote, I feel that on the issue of systemic racism in this country as it relates to what I have taken away from my education at Novi, I have almost nothing to say because I can recall no particular emphasis or great depth ever being placed on these issues of race that have and continue to plague this country. 30 of 61, Fallon Johnson. A 2015 graduate of Novi High School, I'm writing in support of the petition to address systemic racism. I'm also sharing the stories of other petition signers. A 2018 alumni wrote, when I was a student at Deerfield, I was the only black girl in my class. I was told by white classmates that I couldn't play with her and her friends because I was black, and that I was ugly because of my skin color, hair, lips, etc. I told the teacher, but the incident was never properly addressed. The girl was made to apologize, but no further action was taken. My parents and the parents of the girl were not even made aware of the incident. I don't think that Novi teachers are properly trained on how to deal with racial issues like this. It seems like incidents are brushed under the rug and ignored. A current Novi student said, as a student who's gone to Novi schools my whole life, I would love to see a change in curriculums that talk about race. We need to amplify black voices more effectively in their stories that could be taught in school. From that, I've noticed growing up in our schools, subtle and open racism has always been an issue. A Novi resident signed the petition and shared, we strongly condemn any form of racism in our community. A 2020 grad wrote, this incident did not happen on NHS school grounds, but in an interaction with other NHS students, alumni. My name is something that I hold pride in. All my life, people have difficulty pronouncing it, but I understand that my language vowels and English vowels are read differently, so I politely correct the other individual. While What I am not okay with, however, is a mockery of my name, heritage, and culture. Unfortunately, this summer, a few individuals who are associated with the Novi Community School District as students and recent alumni decided to mock both my and my friends' names in not so original ways. When told to stop, they continued. This in itself would have been irritating at the least and a nuisance at the most, but when called out on how disrespectful I found that rewording of my name, a certain individual decided that they were going to mock my home country, India, and discuss the colonization, read mass war, murder, rape against my country by the British, saying, "You mean the country that got colonized by England?" among other comments, implying both myself and India as weak. I find this unacceptable. I called out this obvious racist comment, and after a long while, the racist individual decided to apologize. I decided to leave the discussion where it was and accept the apologies, but a few days later, after some instances of anger against me and my friends due to outside conflict, that same individual decided to message me with one simple word: colonized. For a white man with no regard for my heritage and culture to be calling out my country with one simple word, colonized, or to be calling out my country, my heritage, and myself as weak and helpless is unacceptable, rude, and should not be tolerated. Unfortunately, as I said before, this incident happened this summer and could not be brought up to administration as nothing would have come from the matter, the whole reason for this petition. But this is just the most recent of continuous racism and ingrained mindsets in Novi that must be dismantled for a better tomorrow. Another member of the class of 2020 recalled teachers forcing students to read the N-word in To Kill a Mockingbird because it is accurate literature. 31 out of 61. Sonali Mathar. What is the detailed plan if the parents choose the online method of instruction for fall? We are expecting daily Zoom classes, not a once-a-week interaction with the teachers. Also, what is the return to school protocol if that is the option chosen? Are you expecting a certain number of kids only at school in class? How is the board ensuring the safety given the number of cases that is going up? 32 out of 61. Akash Ray. I am writing in support of the petition to address racism in the Novi Community School District. I am lending my voice to students, staff, parents, and alumni who ask that their experience be shared with the Board of Education. 2008 alumni wrote this: I attended Novi schools and have lived in Novi my whole life. I have seen many changes in Novi, including making Novi an open school district back in 2005-06 and how it has affected the community. I believe that making Novi schools an open district was intended to be an opportunity for all kids to receive a great education. But in the process, people never actually accepted that there would be children, families, men and women in this community that may have different color, skin, or heritage that would be working and living next to them. It is because of white supremacy, ignorance, generational misinformation, and deception, and plain and simply being extremely educated about African American community, that Novi has not adjusted and accepted people of African American descent. We must educate the people and children so they may have some sort of concept and knowledge of social injustice and racism. It starts with teaching kids that there is only one race, the human race. We all deserve equality, education, opportunity, freedom, love, acceptance, and to live without fear. I stand with the African American community and stand up against racial injustice. Also, I think that the police have no business being in school harassing students and racial profiling. Teachers, advisors, counselors, principals, and parents should be the only people involved when a juvenile is in trouble or troubled. Police enforcement and enforcement on civilians is not necessary. A 2013 alumni remembered, a high school English teacher consistently graded Black students' essays lower than other students, even when other students who were earning good grades in English helped the student edit and revise their work. A social studies class addressing world religions was inaccurate in its depiction of Hinduism, and a Hindu student was asked to verify the information and instruct the class on the teachings of Hinduism. The social studies teacher mocked Hindu beliefs in front of the class. A 2017 alumni said, my brother, who is a POC, has gotten into trouble for defending himself by faculty when he was called multiple racial slurs, including the N-word. My siblings are POC and I'm Caucasian, and I've seen them face discrimination and racist bullying. Even an area of the high school has been referred to as Africa because POC hung around there. A class of 2016 grads said, in previous Novi High School yearbook, there's an image of a student in blackface standing next to another student wearing a KKK outfit. Secondly, a certain hallway in the high school was designated as Africa because Black students may have congregated there frequently. A 2015 alumni said, out of all the teachers I had, 1 to 12, as I moved in Novi in the first grade, I've only had 2 POC teachers, both in high school. Others in my class probably had 0. Both of these teachers became my favorites because I connected with them more, as I am also a POC. We need more POC teachers so that kids might be able to feel more comfortable with a teacher that looks like them and can connect with them. 33 of 61, Louisa Zhang. I'm here to support the petition to address systemic racism in our schools and to lift up the voices of other supporters who want their stories shared with the Board of Education. A 2014 alumni remembered when I was a junior in high school, every rising senior had to have a group counseling session with their guidance counselor in order to learn how to prepare for their final year of high school and their post-college career. My guidance counselor in a room full of 15 students asked, do you know who will be the most successful after high school? Without waiting for a response, he pointed to the only 4 Asian students in the class. This perpetuated not only the model minority myth, but also made students of other minority ethnic groups feel inferior, as if no matter what they did, they could just not get ahead. I don't think I need to spell out how harmful this can be. A guidance counselor telling Black, Indigenous, and Latinx students in that room that they will never be good enough. Disgusting, shameful. The counselor retired soon after, so unfortunately, I do not have the pleasure of seeing him get repercussions for his rhetoric. An alumni who graduated in 2017 wrote, because I am brown, some of my teachers assumed I was automatically good at everything. When I needed help, they'd spend maybe 5 minutes with me or give me the same answer when I didn't understand what was happening. Meanwhile, my white classmates would get more time with the teacher, and the teacher would actually try to help them understand. I do want to reiterate, this is not all the teachers I had, and I had some amazing teachers who truly inspired me, and I'm now studying to become a teacher. But there are definitely some teachers who play into the racial stereotypes, and it's affecting their students. Another petition supporter shared, I'm a white alumni of the graduating class of 2019. I'm disgusted and appalled that calling a section of school Africa was normalized in our student body throughout my 2 years at Novi High School and before. Although I never took part in calling it that and even discussed how it was wrong with one of my favorite teachers, I never did anything to actively stop it. As a white person, it is my duty to listen. I hope we can address our failure as students, teachers, and administrators and use it as a lesson on how we can do better in our own community. Admins need to take the role of educating us further than the textbook. A 2010 graduate said, so many moments of my upbringing could have been unpacked, understood, and processed if we'd been given time, space to dialogue and understand one another and unpack systemic inequities. And that's just to speak to the microaggressions and moments that largely white students and faculty perpetuated throughout my time in Novi. We must be better. We must do better. 34 of 61. Caitlin Waters. I am commenting tonight to express my support for the petition to address racism in Novi schools. I would also like to lift up the voices of other supporters who ask that their story be shared with the Board of Education. The 2011 graduate remembered, when I graduated, we may have had only 10 Black students in my class, 2 Black teachers, and 1 Black administrator. 2012 alumni said, I am a Caucasian female who ran track and had many African-American friends. The biggest thing I remember hearing from both my white and African-American friends is the locker area in the downstairs science hallway was termed Africa because that is where the majority of African-American lockers were at. And this was a clear term said out loud in front of teachers, and it was never corrected or pointed out as wrong. Something else I remembered is not learning true Black history. My husband, who happens to be African-American, couldn't believe how little I knew and was taught, and especially the fact that I did not know the meaning of June 19th. An alumni recalled, one time when I was in a restaurant with my family back when I was in middle school, I saw another boy with his parents from one of my classes. I said hi to him, and then he didn't say hi back, and his parents didn't say anything either. They all just looked at us. The incident felt racist to me. A 2008 alumni wrote, I didn't have a single teacher of color until my freshman year of college. This seems highly problematic. That one teacher remained the only person of color I've ever had while in the Novi Community School District. Another petition supporter who graduated in 2008 said, people of color, specifically Black students, have been systemically and disproportionately targeted and negatively impacted by systemic inequities and racism, not only within our legal system, but within the education system. It is well beyond time for curriculums to include accurate history and not the whitewashed versions and step towards reaching equality for Black people. A 2012 graduate remembered, once while leaving Novi High School's 2010 summer school program, I saw some fellow students driving by the front entrance in a truck flying Confederate flags and chanting, "America is white, Africa is black, send those N-word back." They were from another district and only there for summer school, but regardless, this kind of behavior is reprehensible and should be addressed through education as well as consequences. And the 2016 alumni said, as an alum that is an educator, I fully support this petition. I remember my time in Novi schools fondly and would like to see the school system continue to grow and improve. You are a leader in public schools in Michigan, and as such, you have a responsibility to set an example for the rest of the state and maybe even the country. Be on the right side of history, or at least try to be. Take this petition seriously, put your money where your mouth is, and be a leader in what you always claim to be. 35 out of 61. Bailey Boricki. I'm commenting today because I support the anti-racism action in Novi Community School District. I would like to use my voice to share the stories of petition supporters who wanted the Board of Education to hear their experiences in the Novi schools. One alumni remembered being called Africa and being asked insulting questions, even singled out by teachers. 2019 graduate said, I remember clearly the area where the bus drop-off at the high school is being referred to as Africa, because that is where a large population of Black students would hang out. I never had a non-white teacher the entire time I was in Novi. Another alumni from the class of 2019 wrote, I remember in high school there were parts of the school where mostly Black people and another part where mostly Indian people would meet. And I distinctly remember those areas being known as Africa and India, and some jokes being made about it, which is not okay. 2010 alumni said, I don't remember learning anything in any of my classes at Novi schools, attended K-12, on systemic racism, Tulsa and Rosewood massacres, redlining, or any of the things I'm just now learning as an adult about the adversity the Black community is facing today and why. Those roots run deep, and the history curriculum has been whitewashed and sugar-coated. The truth has been kept from us, and it's time these things are addressed in classrooms. Let's be the change we want to see in the world. It starts with educating our youth and stopping any forms of racism at all costs. I remember there being a distinct division between white and Black students at Novi High School. The white kids referred to sections of the school where the Black kids hung out as Africa. I also remember a kid with Tourette's in our class that yelled profanities and racial slurs in the middle of class. A Black girl in class cried when he kept shouting the N-word. I don't recall anything being done about that. No one said anything. No one did anything. I'm sure there were more instances of racism that I was blind to at school, but I really believe there needs to be more done to unite students, diversify staff, and incorporate the truth behind systemic racism in our history classes. The 2019 alumni said, schools are where children and teenagers spend the most time during the year. Without addressing racism, they will not understand the issues that become more prevalent once they leave high school. For those parents, educators, and anyone else in Novi who believe these conversations will be uncomfortable, I urge them to think about the people that suffer from police brutality, racism, and microaggressions every day. Education and human rights are not and should not be only for a certain group of people, but for everyone. The current student wants the Board of Ed to hear this. There have been multiple instances that I can count where I've been told jokes about dog eating, how small my eyes are, and more like that. Unfortunately, I can't think of a story associated with these events because of how normalized it has become. That in itself is a problem. For racist comments to be thrown around and not being able to remember a story associated with it just shows how normalized it has become and how common it is within our community. However, there are still a few stories that have stuck with me. In elementary school, I remember sitting down at a table for lunch and opening it to eat. As soon as I started to eat my lunch, people started making remarks of disgust. One kid, who I still remember the name of, went out of his way to say, "You can sit by me, but don't ever bring that again," referring to my lunch. As soon as he had done that, a wave of similar comments came. "Sit at the other table if you're going to eat that. That smells so bad. You can sit here, but not if you're going to bring that again." Another story revolves around my legal name. My legal name is, and the name's redacted. Growing up, I would always hate my legal name because of how un-American or how non-white it was. I would always be made fun of for my name. I hated it. I would always go by the name, another name. I remember going on a walk with my mom one summer and begging her to legally change my name, which roots from Korea and given to me by my grandpa. I can just imagine how hurt she must have been. NCSD has made me feel alienated, even when I'm a citizen of the United States, and got me to hate my culture. That is my story. 36 out of 61. Neha Gogani. I'm a 2018 graduate of Novi High School. I'm here to express my support for the petition to address systemic racism in our school. I'm also lending my voice to elevate the voices of other respondents who wanted the Board of Ed to hear their experiences. A Novi resident wrote, teachers from 2008 to 2011 allowed students to tease and insult other students of colors without any repercussions, and even times laughed along with the students making the joke. Another resident signed the petition and commented, my child's English teacher was reading a book and instead of saying the N-word, actually said the word aloud in class. My child has said it was very uncomfortable for the Black kids in class and was upset that the teacher had said the word. A parent in Novi said, my 6th grader wants to see the end of the one-sided narrative of American history in our textbook. Please stop signing contracts with textbook companies that whitewash history. A Novi parent shared, my son in kindergarten was approached by a classmate in conversation. I am a biracial person who is Asian and European. We have diversity in our family and home. My little one came home one day and said, I don't want dark skin. I was floored because our family is one rooted in the promotion of diversity. A classmate told him that white skin or light skin is better and brown skin or dark skin is bad. When I asked who his classmate was, you may be surprised or not to know his classmate was not white, but was from a family from India. I'm aware that India also has a caste system based on color of skin, but the reason why I bring this up is because we have a huge opportunity to address anti-racism and diversity from a very young age. It is needed. A 5-year-old can be made to feel shame for who they are or what they look like. As a parent, we cannot allow this to happen. I grew up in a predominantly white community and experienced racism due to my being Asian. But Novi is a tremendously diverse community, and that is one of the reasons why I wanted my son to grow up here. But because we are a diverse community does not mean we cannot be lax when it comes to teaching our families and youth to be anti-racial. That racism and prejudice in any form is not acceptable.
Dr. Matthews, can I stop you for a moment, please? Thank you. So we are going to take a 5-minute break since we've been at this for a bit. And then I also want to have a discussion that in our operating procedures, the board designates 30 minutes for this portion of the agenda. We did let that go on because we find this to be very important conversation. But we're going to take a 5-minute break and then we're going to come back. And Dr. Matthews, if we have any other comments from the audience regarding a different topic, I would ask that in our second opportunity for comments from the audience, if you can read them at that point so we can continue on with our agenda.
Okay. Very good.
Can I just ask, Dr. Matthews, are those all printed out?
Now, they will all be downloaded and the board will be given them. And we could also post them in the minutes of the meeting.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. And even the ones that you did not read, we will be able to see. Is that correct? Okay. All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sheila has already emailed them to us.
Great. Thank you, Marianne. I haven't had the opportunity to check that while we were on here. And for those of you watching and are unaware of public comment, so public comment, we do not have a back and forth conversation. The comments are read to us, and as was pointed out, all of the comments that have been shared via the document will be shared with the Board of Education and the cabinet. So we will take a 5-minute break and then we will resume at 9.
Back.
Thank you. Okay, we are back from our break. We are going to ask Lucas to start recording and we will continue on with our agenda. Next item is the consent items. Our consent agenda has 2 items. It's the approval of the minutes, the regular meeting minutes of June 18th, 2020, and the approval of the bills and the check register. So if I can get a recommendation, Mrs. Murphy?
I will move to approve the consent items as presented.
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Murphy and supported by Mrs. Browning. Mr. Mena, if we can get a roll call, please.
Trustee Cook.
Yes.
Trustee Hood. Trustee Hood.
Oh my God. Yes.
Sorry about that. All right. Trustee Mena, yes. Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Roney.
Yes.
Trustee Reskin.
Yes.
Trustee Smith.
Yes.
items. We have one action item, the personnel recommendations. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Dr. Reskin. We actually have two parts to our personnel recommendations this evening. I will turn the first part over to Dr. Kinzer.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. This evening, we have 2 resignations and 1 retirement. The resignations are Jody Minkevitz, special education teacher, Novi High School, and Melissa Matson, executive assistant in the Office of Academics. And the retirement is Sasha Roberts-Levi, adult education teacher.
Thank you, Dr. Kinzer. May I get a recommendation?
No, not from me.
Okay, Mr. Mena?
Any of you?
Yeah, I move that we.
Melissa Matson, Mena, don't do it. If you accept Melissa Matson's resignation, I'm done with you, Mena.
Yeah, she can come after me. That's okay. I approve. I move that we approve personnel report as presented.
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Meta and supported by Mr. Cook. Any comments?
I will be a reluctant agreement. Reluctant, very, very reluctant. Just wanted that on the record.
Melissa was a rock star, is a rock star.
We go through this from time to time where somebody who is just invaluable to the district decides to leave, and for one reason or another, and they will be sorely missed. You know, it's really not within our control to say, no, you have to keep working, although we would like to. So.
Yeah, I'll tell you, serving beside Melissa for 5 years, you know, stunning as a professional is an understatement. There are so many things that she touched and made happen. I think if I'm going to say one thing that I'm proudest of is our psychiatric evaluation form work. Doesn't get a lot of press. It's nothing flashy and glitzy, but it took so much effort to get that across the finish line. And now there are schools throughout Oakland County using it. And that's for students who may be thinking of harming themselves. That's one of 5 billion things that she did. I'm really proud of her making the decision to move on, and what she has coming up in her future is everything she deserves and needs to do. But without a doubt, there are people behind the scenes that often communities have no idea their importance and value, and I think Melissa's definitely that. So I'm going to miss her to death.
Shared on Twitter yesterday, and we want to thank Jody and Sasha for their service as well. So if we can get a roll call vote, Mr. Mena?
Trustee Cook?
Yes.
Trustee Hood?
Yes.
Trustee Mena? Yes. Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Roney?
Yes.
Trustee Ruskin?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
And we have a second.
7-0, and then we have the second part. Go ahead, Dr. Matthews. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay. I interrupted you, actually. So I would like to present for your consideration an administrative hire this evening. I would like to recommend Greg McIntyre for the Assistant Superintendent for Business and Operations. Upon the announcement by Jill Minnick of her intent to resign, we have worked to find the best candidate to step into that position. The position was posted on May 4th and closed on May 26th. We posted in the typical places: the Michigan School Business Officials website, Oakland Schools Consortium website, Indeed, LinkedIn. Colleagues from the Michigan School Business Officials were asked for references, and emails were sent directly to potential candidates. There were 18 applicants for the position. A review of the applicants was done daily. 5 applicants were identified to participate in the HumanX leadership screening interview. These 5 applicants were selected based on their match with the job posting, their experience, and their work history. All 5 applicants were given a senior educational leadership interview through HumanX. After all were interviewed, HumanX reviewed the results with the Novi cabinet. Based on the feedback from HumanX and the insight they had on each candidate, 3 were selected for an in-person interview in front of a panel. The panel consisted of all the following individuals: Cindy Valentine, Director of Transportation; Mike Dragoo, Director of Maintenance; Brian Gordon, Athletic Director; Lisa Fenchel, Principal of Novi Meadows; Nicole Carter, principal of Novi High School, Jody Malbon, payroll supervisor, Christine Diataker, executive assistant to the assistant superintendent for business and operations, Deanna Wheeler, the director of finance, Dr. RJ Weber, assistant superintendent of academics, Dr. Gary Kinzer, assistant superintendent for human resources, and myself. Each panelist was chosen because of their connection to the business office and their understanding of the district. That connection was in accounting, finance, food service, purchasing, transportation, payroll, security, and budgeting in the district interest. Each panelist was also chosen because they have demonstrated ability to think through and think about difficult problems. Each applicant was asked to make a presentation of 10 minutes and introducing themselves and identifying what their first 30 days in the district would look like. Then they were asked a series of questions from the panelists. After the interviews, the committee discussed each candidate or each applicant in depth, citing answers to interview questions and identifying strengths and areas of concern. One candidate was called back for a second in-person interview with key business office personnel and cabinet members. After the second interview, references were checked. Tonight, I recommend Gregory McIntyre to the Board of Education to be hired for the Assistant Superintendent of Business and Operations. Mr. McIntyre has worked as an Assistant Superintendent of Business Services in Redford Union School District.
Does he know he's frozen?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
No. We're technical difficulties. Mrs. Holly is walking down to take care of this.
Well, you have the document in front of you. Want to just continue reading where you left off?
Dr. Kinzer? Oh.
Here he is.
Unmute yourself, Dr. Matthews, and you'll be all set.
I left for a while. It was a momentary flight of fancy. References for Mr. McIntyre spoke of his character, his understanding of school finance, his willingness to find and make difficult decisions, and his genuine care for the students and staff. I believe Mr. McIntyre will make a strong addition to our central office leadership team. So I recommend Mr. McIntyre to the Novi Community School District Board of Education because I believe that he will add value to our team and continue to help us move forward as a district.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. If I can get a recommendation, Mr. Smith?
I recommend that the Novi Community School District Board of Education approves Gregory McIntyre as the new Assistant Superintendent for Business and Operations.
I'll support.
Points of discussion? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Mena, if I can get a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Cook.
Yes.
Trustee Hood.
Yes.
Trustee Mena, yes. Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Roney.
Yes.
Trustee Ruskin.
Yes.
Trustee Smith.
Yes.
We look forward to welcoming our new assistant superintendent at our next meeting, August 6th.
That'll be awesome. He begins on Monday, July 20th.
Great. Thank you for that.
Excellent.
Okay. Next, we have information and discussion. We have 3 items, beginning with the return to school plan discussion. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Dr. Ruskin. As you know, the governor has issued a return to school roadmap. Here in our district, we have been working tirelessly for the past several months on developing a plan to discuss with the Board of Education about our return to school. We did not put out a plan previous to June 30th, and that was after the last board meeting that the board had in June, because the governor did not present her recommendations until June 30th. And we knew that we would have this July 16th board meeting with the board to begin discussions of this plan. The board will need to approve what is called the preparedness plan at their August 6th board meeting, because it has to be turned into the state and the Oakland schools by August 15th. And we will not have another board meeting after August 6th before the 15th. And so we initially started with 3 committees that were looking at in-person, hybrid, and virtual. Those were administrative committees because we had to have some discussions about staffing and decisions that we felt it was too early to bring in our other staff members on. And then Dr. Weber began developing a team of teachers and administrators that would expand on the work of those original 3 committees. And what we have landed on is a fairly robust plan, but we stayed in the plan that it's a plan that is a work in progress. And so all of you, I think, have seen the ROAR plan and all of the areas that we're trying to address in the ROAR plan. The 2 basic areas that we have identified is that we will have an in-person school experience for students, but we will also have a virtual experience for students. We have decided not to do a hybrid approach for a couple of primary reasons. One is that we don't think it's a fair expectation for teachers. In a hybrid approach, typically students would come 2 days a week, 2 or 3 days a week, and then be at home in a virtual experience. And when the other half of the students came 2 or 3 days a week. The advantage of the hybrid approach is that you only have half of your students in a school at any one time. But the disadvantage to the hybrid approach is that there is an expectation that this teacher would teach not only the students in school that sit in front of them, but would also be able to teach the schools that were at home in their virtual experience. And so to have an expectation that a teacher would be able to do that in one day, we don't think is reasonable. The second reason that we don't think a hybrid approach would work well is because the experience for students would be 2 to 3 days in school a week and then at home. And the experience at home would either be that the teacher at school would ignore them completely, give them homework or a packet to take home with them for those 2 or 3 days that they're at home. And they would have to work on that independently without any feedback from a teacher or any other person at school, because that teacher is teaching the students in front of them. Or that the expectation would be that the teacher would be trying to do both, and we don't think that the teacher would do well in teaching both virtual and in person. And so we are not pursuing the hybrid approach really. We're really pursuing either the in-person or the virtual.
You know, Steve, I think it's also important, not only is it a group of teachers and administrators who are working on this return, but parents, our school resource officers, head of food service, head of maintenance, head of transportation, in bringing all of these pieces in, our school nurse, and really the notion of what I think is really very important is that this is changing as we speak. In the past 2 days, we've had several large districts say that they're not even going to return in the fall. Lansing schools just announced within a couple hours it's the same piece. So many of the questions that I know Dr. Matthews is fielding from community members around perhaps, why this decision wasn't made or why this one was made, I think it's really important at the beginning of this presentation that we all accept a very uncomfortable truth. And that uncomfortable truth is that everything that we do and all the work we do could be shelved for another reason. And that is why, our own patience as a community and our own grace that we need to have with each other through this is critically important. And I appreciate that Dr. Matthews is sharing the why behind the hybrid and why not. And I'm sure that he'll share more from that ROAR plan, but there are several things that we are terribly excited about with the ROAR plan, and that really is our attention to social emotional learning, restorative practices, kind of a slow roll approach in that we can talk about, Steve, when you want me to. But, you know, what I would caution people to do is, in living in the community, I felt this. I had a couple parents question me last week when I was with my son about why we're not doing this or why we're doing that. And I would just ask anybody to think, if you needed to change your business model in 24 hours, could you? And that's ostensibly what we were asked to do on March 12th. Our approach in the fall is going to be far more robust on the virtual end. We've already went toward that. But our belief is that if we are going to come back in stage 4, if that's the choice the governor is going to allow us to do, that we want to do everything within reason, give people that virtual option. But we believe we need to be back together 5 days a week with our children, and our children need us.
So we have sent out requests to parents to ask questions, and we have gotten a number of questions. So we're putting them together in a question and answer. That the first version of that will go out to parents on Tuesday, July 21st, and the second version will go out on Tuesday, July 28th. And then from there, we would like to have further discussion with our community about some of the points that they still either question or don't fully understand before we come back to the board on August 6th to have that discussion. We will also send these questions out to the board ahead of time so that you can kind of get a sense of what the questions are from the community. Instead of trying to answer them individually in email, we're trying to put them together in a question and answer frequently asked question format. I'd like to review some of those with you this evening. The first is, can parents decide which options to choose for the fall? And the answer to that will be yes. The district is starting with the position that everyone will be coming back to in-person. However, we are going to have a form that if a family wants to go virtual, that they would complete, and that form will begin to be available on August 3rd. And we will ask them to complete that form by August 9th, because that will then influence our staffing decisions. So if we did a survey earlier this spring asking parents what they were thinking of at the time, and 85% of our parents said that they would be sending their kids back to in-person instruction, and 15% would be going virtual. As the summer has progressed, we anticipate that we might have more students who are interested in a virtual option because of the progression of the virus and those kinds of things. But we need to know that in order to staff our buildings appropriately. So on August 3rd, families are going to be able to have that form and either send it back to us virtually, or there will be forms available here at the ESB that they could come in and fill out as well. A number of questions have been asked about what happens when a student or staff member tests positive for COVID. And we've been working with the Oakland County Health Department, also with our school nurse, Kathy Ferris. And our current protocol would be that if a staff member or student tests positive for COVID, they will be directed to self-quarantine at home for 14 days. Any siblings of a student who tests positive will also be directed to self-quarantine at home for 14 days from the date that they receive the positive test. So if a parent or any other person living in the household of a student tests positive for COVID, the student and any of the siblings will be directed to self-quarantine for 14 days. Staff members or students who test positive and are symptom-free may return to school when 14 days have passed since the date of his or her first positive test, and they have not had any subsequent illness. Staff members or students who test positive and are directed to seek care for themselves at home may return to school when 14 days have passed, or NCSD will require a staff member or student to provide documentation clearing his or her return to school. And so this protocol will be outlined to our parents in the information that we send out to them. And we also will explain the protocols for exposure. That the Oakland County Health Department has really talked to us about close contact being really the point of quarantine. And close contact is defined as contact that is less than 6 feet apart and face-to-face for a prolonged period of time, 15 minutes or greater. And so if a person has that face-to-face contact, even if they're wearing a mask, for 15 minutes or longer within 6 feet of each other, they would be expected to quarantine at home as well if they've had that close contact. And so all of these, we will send you this update of the question and answers that we currently have starting tomorrow so that you can look through some of these as well. With all, someone asked, with all the possible restrictions, is it even worth returning to in-person face-to-face instruction? And there are several groups that advocate for in-person face-to-face instruction. The American Academy of Pediatrics, American Federation of Teachers, the National Education Association, and AASA, the School Superintendents Association, all advocate for a return if we can do it safely. And so let me give you some sense of how we plan on doing this safely. The safety protocols that we're emphasizing are as follows: masking for students. So students in grades 5 through 12, the governor requires, if we're in phase 4, that masks be worn on students 6 through 12. But because we have a 5-6 building, our district stance will be required mask for students in 5 through 12, and then strongly recommended for students in grades K through 4. So mask will be required. So that's one part of our safety. Second will be hygiene, so that we will have disinfectant wipes. We will have hand sanitizer throughout our buildings, on our buses. That the expectation is that we will have students use that on a regular basis. And then the third is a concept called cohorting, or keeping groups of students together as much as possible. And so when we think of returning to in-person instruction, we will have a typical number of students in class. So at elementary, that will be anywhere between 19 and 23 or 24 students in a class. Social distancing is recommended, but not is strongly recommended, not required. And truthfully, in our classrooms, we cannot social distance 6 feet apart from each other. We just don't have the physical space. We can spread out our desk as far as possible. Use the space within the classroom to create as much space as possible. And many of those spaces will be 3 feet apart from each other. But spacing is definitely a concern and an issue that not only Novi, but almost any district in the state. And that's why it's not a required element, but a strongly recommended element. And so classrooms will have that typical number of students in them. Desks will be moved as far apart as possible. All desks will be facing one direction. Students will be assigned a desk. And the K-6 students will sit in the same desk all day long. That will be their assigned seat. And we do this so that we can always know who is around them for that cohorting piece of the experience. 7, 12 students, they will be assigned a desk in each class period. Student movement within the classroom will be limited. Small group interactions may take place, but students will keep an appropriate distance from each other. Students will not share supplies with each other. Teachers will be able to move throughout the classroom and interact with students either one-on-one or in small groups. Lunch at this time is planned for the classroom. Students will be able to order breakfast and lunch from our food service department, and lunches and breakfast will be delivered to the classroom. And this is done to prevent the gathering of large groups, especially if we're still in phase 4. As I mentioned, masks are going to be required in phase 4 for all students in grades 5 through 12, and masks will be strongly encouraged in grades K through 4, and all staff will be required to wear masks. We have also asked some of our robotics teams, Frog Force, and some of the middle school robotics teams, they are using 3D printers to print clear face shields for all of us. The Frog Force is actually printing up to 700 of the shields. We have a middle school robotics team that's printing another 100 of the shields. And so every staff member will be given one of those shields as well. There have been questions about recess and specials, arrivals, dismissals, all those things we are taking our time to think through and think about. Is there going to be win time? Yes, there will be win time. Will it look the same as it currently does? No, it won't. Primarily, interventionists and specialists will be pushing into classrooms as opposed to taking students out of classrooms. Will students have interaction with other students during the day? They will have at K through 6, they will really have interaction with the students in their classroom. 7 through 12, they'll have a little bit wider of an experience, but we are trying to limit that experience as well. Hopefully groups of 100 or the ninth graders only, those kinds of experiences. So there will be that interaction with other students. Our plan is to encourage the mental well-being of our students, and we had success doing that online, but we also believe that we'll have success doing that as students return to school. As RJ mentioned, Dr. Weber mentioned, there will be an emphasis on the in-person experience of focusing on that social emotional part for students. We'll be using Playworks as one of our tools to help us with that. We'll also be leaning on our social workers and others. Dr. Weber, I didn't know if you wanted to address any of that.
I think something that our return to school plan makes it unique. I've had the good fortune in being on nationwide and panels about how schools return and so on. And we're calling it a slow roll back in, which, think about it, as 25% of our class days of the first 60 will be spent on intentional work with dialogues using restorative practices to talk about the trauma that our students and our staff have faced throughout this closure. Some of our students have lost family members. Our teachers have lost family members. We have had one of the largest conversations about race in our nation's history while our schools have been closed. Our plan makes space and time for our staff and our students to address those issues as well in real dialogue and conversation. We also have and are putting together an assessment package where we can find out where each individual student is regarding their learning. So this grace is going to be very important in our mind for our students and our staff, in the sense that we can't just show up September 8th and pretend, nothing happened, let's just get to work. The suppressing that trauma that's occurred, not being honest and open and discussing it will do our students and staff, in our opinion, a tremendous amount of harm. Also, by giving the grace and the space for people to slow down a little bit, you might cover less content this year, but I don't really, and this is weird coming from the chief of academics, that doesn't bother me. What would bother me more is if we pretend none of this happened and we just rolled into the school year. From a safety standpoint, the social emotional aspects of it as well, and perhaps Dr. Kinzer would want to speak to this, I'm really concerned about our teachers. Our teachers will be in, potentially in classrooms of 20 to 25 students. They have their own loved ones that they're going to go back to. Maybe they're caring for their own aging parents, and they're worried about what this virus could do to them. That is real. The anxiety of the people who serve our students is real and should not and cannot be discounted. So the thing about the way we are coming back into it in person is something that I'm exceptionally proud of. And the reason that we can do this is because, frankly, the community and the board have invested in many of the things that we presented about earlier tonight. The other thing I'd like to say about that is it will be difficult to do that same level and that same scale for virtual students. Our goal is to have the best virtual program in the state of Michigan, frankly. So lots of people out there are slick advertising, telling families they've got it all figured out. And I've got to say right now, I'm disappointed in a lot of my colleagues across the state and what I'm seeing being publicized. Having done this for 28 years, I have a little bit of an idea of what it takes to educate kids. And in being with them in person is the optimal way for 95% of our kids to learn. There's 5% that it's not, and I think this has actually been a very good thing for them. But I need the community, and we need the community to understand that the safety goes way beyond wiping desks and wearing masks. it goes into also the emotional and mental well-being of our staff and our students. And that is something we are going to attend to. So you may not see your kids start right out of the gate hammering on content, because we need to check in and make sure they're okay. We need to take care of them, right?
Dr. Kinzer, I didn't know if you had any comments.
Yeah, I would like to jump in. So, Dr. Weber, thank you for segueing into that. I really would like to comment on our staff and thank Heather Burnside and Grant Dalton, who is our new MEA representative, for partnering with us. And together, we really are going to implement a system which is best for our students. And the only way we can do that is if we also take care of our staff. Dr. Weber commented that the challenges they face are real and we're mindful of them. We're going to do our very best to implement the plan that we're in the process of developing with fidelity and in a way that provides high quality instruction to our students in a very humane way. Thanks.
We have some other questions related to kind of the in-person experience that I will share the answers with you tomorrow, but also we will share these answers with our community on Tuesday. Such things as lockers and walking in the hallways, changing classes, some of those kinds of things. Recess, we plan on having recess. Typically the recess experience for K6 would be the teacher taking out their own class outside. More than one class could be outside, but they wouldn't be able to interact with each other. They would be kind of, that cohorting function would continue even through recess. Specials would be K6, more than likely done in class. So the art teacher would go in, the music teacher would go in, the media person would go in. And this is done, again, to keep kids kind of in one location, to prevent them from kind of engaging with other students throughout the building. It really is that cohorting experience. And some may say, well, this isn't the typical in-person experience. And the answer is no, it's not. But it's done in an effort to promote safety and to ensure that if illness does come, that we would be able to identify the touches that sick person had with other students in the building or other staff in the building. And so we believe we can create a safe environment. But again, part of this is going to be based on how comfortable the board is with this approach. And so we're going to share all these questions and answers with you, because ultimately you're going to have to sign off on this. Now, the other part of this, we'll have the in-person option, but we'll also have the virtual option. And the virtual option will look significantly different than the virtual option we had in the spring. The virtual day will be really a virtual school day. Teachers will be available during school hours. There will be a minimum of 15 minutes of live instruction every hour. And then teachers will do much of what they do during kind of a typical school day. They could assign students work, they could work with small groups of virtual students, they could conference individually with students, or they could continue to provide whole class instruction. But there will be a minimum of 15 minutes of live instruction each hour during the course of the day. The time commitment for virtual students will be very similar to the time commitment for in-person students. In other words, there will be the regular school day. Students will have touches throughout the school day with their teacher in multiple hours. Teachers will assign work that students may do it kind of individually and then check back in with the teacher, or students may be put in, Zoom has a feature of breakout rooms. Students may be put in breakout rooms with other students virtually to work together. Those kinds of things, but the time commitment for the virtual experience will be very similar to the time commitment for the in-person experience. There will be testing, there will be grades given virtually. We're looking for answers to how to do fine arts, virtually. How do you do choir, how do you do band, how do you do dance, orchestra, all those kinds of things. And there may not be a great answer to that, but we're continuing to try to find the answer so our students will have that opportunity to have that experience. Will virtual students interact with in-person classrooms? And the answer at this point, we believe, is no, that in-person and virtual experiences will be separate. Can we provide for the social emotional development of our students virtually? We had some success with that in the spring, and we think we learned some things in the spring, and we think that we can continue to build on that and focus on the social emotional development of our students, even if it's a virtual experience. What will electives look like? We think the electives is a question that we're continuing to work on. And will the learning format completely be in Zoom? And the answer to that is no. Zoom is one format, but we'll also use as a primary kind of learning management system, Schoology, and then other programs like Zoom, Google Classroom, Seesaw will continue to be used as well.
Dr. Matthews,
yes,
on
sir.
the virtual part, first off, the school board, so parents know this if they're not aware, and perhaps we can put this in the FAQ, but a lot of the work we've done in the past decade has really gotten us ready, unfortunately or fortunately for this moment. But recent action the school board took that will really help families is the device purchase for our staff and students. So we will be going to a one-to-one device where students will have a presentation for the board on that. One of my favorite questions I get from community members is, why can't you just teach all the kids with Zoom like all day? And it's a fair question. However, being able to really keep people engaged, especially 22 kindergartners in front of a computer for a full day, if we really think about it, it's not reasonable. I think those questions come out of genuine desperation of, dear goodness gracious, can I really do this again with 3 kids at home? And I get it. And I'll tell you, I was teacher of the year, principal of the year, and if I myself taught my son well one day a week, he got a good week. It was really hard for me, and I'm a teacher, so I get it. But we also have to realize that in a virtual setting, it just cannot replicate what we do with our children in school. And anybody who's telling people out there that their kids can have the same experience online as they do in school is not being honest. We are going to do our best, our absolute best, but we desperately want our kids together. We want to be able to talk to them, to communicate with them, to help them with all the things that I think our teachers do a wonderful job with. But from a platform standpoint, as Dr. Matthews said, we have everything there. The board has approved devices. One of the biggest questions, Dr. Matthews, we got early is why didn't we give grades at the high school? There were a lot of equity reasons that we made that decision, but going forward in the fall, grades are going to be part of every aspect of virtual learning on there. So parents need to hear that we learn from that. And as well, I know Dr. Matthews, myself, we're open. If the community has suggestions or recommendations that we are not seeing, please let us know. Not only will we listen, we'll engage with you around them. But I also just wanted to say a couple things about things that I've been approached at and several times. I think the number one question is, and people are not trying to be disrespectful, but the question is, Dr. Matthews, why can't you just have the teachers teach their kids via Zoom for the whole day? And it's just a very difficult thing to think about. And I know Dr. Kinzer is an elementary principal, so maybe he'd want to say something to that.
I would say that the foundation of education at any level, but even more so in the early grades, is the human connection between teachers and students. And only so much can be accomplished, especially for younger students, over Zoom. It has a very beneficial function as part of an instructional day, but it's very difficult for it to be used as a primary tool.
So that gives you kind of a broad overview of both the in-person and the virtual experience. We also have, transportation that we're looking at. Mask in phase 4 required for anybody who rides on the bus, staff or students. We will have hand sanitizers and disinfectant wipes on the bus for students to use liberally. We're going to continue to pick students up each day. Masks are going to be required, et cetera. At the end of the day, we're going to develop a strategy to limit the groups of students that congregate together before they get on a bus. So we don't have, if you've ever been around the middle school or Meadows, for example, all those students kind of come out all at once. We're going to have to try to figure out how to limit some of those kinds of experiences, and we're working on that as well. Athletics, we're going to follow guidelines by the MHSAA, but ultimately, I think the board can and exert its decision making on this plan. I'd like to send you, as I mentioned, the questions that we've kind of answered so far for you to look at tomorrow. As I said, we're going to send out kind of frequently asked questions to parents on the 21st and the 28th. We'll share those with the board. We'll continue to answer the questions from people, and then on August 3rd, people will kind of be defaulted into the in-person, and if they want the virtual, they will have a form that they would fill out and send back to us by the 9th so that we can start our staffing. Initially, we're thinking that it would be best for people to stay in their choice for at least the first semester into January, because it would be difficult if, say, for example, 25% of our community said virtual, and then after 3 weeks they said, "Oh, I really want to be back in class, in school. This isn't working for my kid." It would be difficult for us to staff that at the school if all of a sudden that happened, because 25% of our student population would be almost 2,000 students. And so how do you bring all of those students back into class in the in-person instruction if you staffed for them to be at home? And so the governor may have some say about this, as if the cases of coronavirus continue to increase, she may step in and make a decision. As Dr. Weber mentioned tonight, the Lansing School District has made the decision to start everybody virtually, and that certainly is a prerogative of the board if they were to choose that. But our goal would be to create a safe environment for students to come to, for both students and staff, and also to have the virtual option for parents who would choose that for this first year. Our goal is to continue to keep our students together so that we can get their per pupil allocation over the course of this year, so that we don't devastate our budget, which is a short discussion item that's coming up. But that's kind of the presentation tonight, Dr. Reskin. We could entertain questions, or the board could just, after tomorrow, when they see this first series of questions, if they have additional questions, they could send them to me and I could respond to the whole board at once.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. Usually I would go around the table and have everybody, ask a question. I want to say a couple things, ask a question or two, and then certainly if there's some burning question that a board member has that you don't think will be answered in these FAQs, or a comment or anything you would like to say that you certainly feel is important to say during this meeting, I wouldn't want to not give you the opportunity. So, but in the interest of time, we'll try and keep those comments and discussions short, okay? So first off, I want to thank all of you for all the work you've done, and everybody who's done work behind the scenes. We as a board recognize how much pressure and work and caring and commitment that's been put into this, and we certainly appreciate that. I believe that students should be back in school, but that being said, I respect every community member's decision on what's best for them and their student, because it's certainly a personal decision. If I could request from Dr. Matthews, Dr. Weber, if you could in the FAQs put information on who's serving on or who served on the current committee. There's been questions out there in the community on who's having these current conversations. And I know we've said teachers and parents, but I think in the roadmap to the return to school from the state of Michigan, they did a really nice job of just putting the members that were the primary members right out there for everybody to see. So I think that that would be important, just to see the diversity and the expertise that's on those decision-making situations. In regards to the hybrid, and certainly, Dr. Weber, if this is something you'd like to answer, with the FAQs, I don't want to put you on the spot or have a long discussion, but was it considered doing not a traditional hybrid, but potentially live streaming kiddos into the classroom? So if I know that there's several districts doing, if a biology class has 30 kids, 15 of them would come certain days. The other 15 would be at home, but they wouldn't be at home doing the traditional online learning that's being described. They would actually be live streamed right into the classroom for a portion of that time.
Yeah, the concerns I have about that modality are and you see it tonight in a presentation where I was fading in and out. Ms. Hoppenstedt was fading in and out. Dr. Matthews froze. It also, so there's a technical issue to that. There's also what it does to constrain and constrict a master teacher from working with their students. To think in any way, shape, or form, for instance, that a first or a second grade teacher would be able to do something like that is hard. And then the third thing is, and again, we are very fortunate, but this is where I'm going to get a little chippy. We also have busted our butts the last 10 years to put us in a position to do what most districts can't do. Because we have our aligned curriculum, because we have our aligned assessment, because we have the technology platforms we've invested in, we're going to be able to provide experiences for kids that aren't going to merely be sticking a camera in a room and pointing it at a lecture-based instruction for the whole hour. So and I say this empathetically, I feel badly for the families in districts who weren't able to get all of that together and whose plan really is for virtual learning as well. And Dr. Matthews shared one of these districts with me today, where they're going to simply put a camera in every room. And if you want to learn virtually, then you're going to show up to that camera lesson, if you will. And there's a tragedy behind that, because if we all have to go out and your district has not built a virtual platform of meaning and depth, then what do you really give your community? So Danielle, President Ruskin, these are the questions that I definitely want to answer. I know it's 10:12 after a long day, but I am more than happy to entertain these, because these are the pieces, these are the things that the 240 people that we've been working with have argued about, went back and forth, have vetted, have thought about, and I'm happy to help the whole community hear the reasoning behind our decisions.
And then the third thing, and then I'm done, is, and I think I brought this up to both of you about, and I could be having it completely wrong, but the clarity on the different phasing systems that the state of Michigan has. So I'm under the understanding, and just to be clear for our community members, because this is a confusing topic, that there is a phasing system in the state of Michigan that ascertains the economy, and we are in phase 4 in our area for that. But then there is also the Michigan State Safe Start Plan, which Oakland County is currently in phase 3, because that is what the school return to school aligns with. Is that correct, or am I wrong in pointing that out or asking that?
There are, you're correct. There are two different kind of phases or stages that the governor has identified. Currently, we're in phase 4 for return to school, but overall, there's also a kind of the community safety stage as well that's being discussed, and those are different stages / phases. But currently we're in phase 4 for return to school, which allows in-person instruction.
Thank you for the clarity. Does anyone else from the board have any comments or questions? Mr. Cook?
I've got two mice here, so I got to find the right one. You know, some parents have been asking about the virtual option and what it's going to look like so that they can do some investigation and decide whether that's what they would need for their students or their kids. And I'm kind of curious, and it's because I spent a lot of time talking to some professors from Lynn University about the difference between online learning and virtual learning. And from what Dr. Matthews described, it sounds like we're going to do online learning, not virtual. So I guess more in depth on how this is going to look for the parents and what they can expect would be great. You know, you don't have to answer that right now, but you know, that's one of the things I wrote down. The other thing is if we slip back from phase 4 to phase 3 and we're no longer allowed to do in-person instruction, but we're already into the school year, are those students going to be basically, are they going to step into the virtual academy, or you know, are they going to get that same type of instruction? Understand the face-to-face time and is not going to be the same. You know, the other thing is, you know, we've got a good plan for our K-6 to keep them isolated and in pods and in small groups. The problem with 7 to 12, our students are, you know, they have to go from classroom to classroom. And wouldn't it be beneficial to have a hybrid option just for those students, you know, that would allow smaller groups, a smaller number of students in the school at one time, and the teachers still, you know, instead of teaching, you know, 5 hours in person, would be teaching 3 hours in person, 2 hours online, or vice versa. You know, to me that kind of sounds like a you know, a way to help out and alleviate some of the distancing issues we may have. And my last thing is kind of a comment, Dr. Matthews, I talked to you about it. You know, the direction of this, of where we go here in the fall, the direction of the school district is the board's responsibility. And, you know, you release this to the parents with a couple hours notice to the board of what it was going to be. Yeah, we did see it shortly ahead of the parents, but it would have been nice for you to come and give this presentation to the board ahead of releasing it to the parents. It's just, it's one of the roles of the board. And, you know, we've been lectured over the years on staying in our swim lane. So, you know, we really appreciate everybody's effort. Which reminds me, another person asked me, how are the parents chosen that were on the committee? You know, or are we going back to those same parents that are used over and over and over again?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer a lot of those questions, Mr. Cook. So first, all the questions you ask are exactly what is keeping people like myself and my colleagues working 7 days a week to try to figure this out, because there are no easy answers. And I will never apologize for slow rolling a good plan to our community as opposed to quickly jumping and changing our plan every day or every week. I am grateful to serve in Novi, where we will not recommend to the board to do what the Utica Community Schools did, which is to offload their entire virtual learning to a private company to do it. The time that we are taking to do this should be, I would hope, a balm to parents who have worked with us to know that we are taking this incredibly seriously and working incredibly hard to do so. As far as parent representation, holding several different parent groups, and I'd like to think I'm my own parent focus group, because about 10 parents every week stop me wherever I'm at to tell me what we should be doing or ask me questions, which again, I'm fine. I live in Novi, I'm good with that. To Danielle's point, we'll go ahead and supply the 240 names of the people who have been working towards this and helping us. And from the high school standpoint, the other part that's making our virtual discussions so difficult is the standard that my colleagues are holding themselves to come up with the perfect solution is an unrealistic standard that I'm trying to get to help them understand that it is very difficult to do things to the absolute level that we've done them here without sacrificing certain things. So our own stubbornness is we're trying to find solutions that other districts, frankly, have already given up on. And one of those pieces is how do we honor our rich fine hearts tradition in Novi, our marching band, our the band that we have. I think of Melissa Matson's daughter in color guard, going back to that. I'm not willing to turn my back because people need answers right now on it. I think we need to keep working really hard. Tomorrow we have, I think, 6 meetings set up to discuss specials in general. So I think those are all good questions, but and I can tell you from a leadership standpoint, it has been really difficult to thread 250 people together through Zoom. So if there is a concern about protocols or sharing of things with people, I would also please ask for grace in the sense that being able to do those things in a virtual way is that much more difficult. I think that Dr. Matthews having those target dates of next Tuesday, Steve, what is that date? The 21st and then the 28th, which is the following day. Tomorrow we'll be able to have some other ideas about specials, but our goal, and we believe people move to Novi. Our core classes are great. And Marianne, I think you could speak to this a little bit. I mean, people come to Novi because of what you all as a school board have built, which is all of the extra things that we're seeing other districts turn away from. And we are fighting like heck to keep those. Thanks.
Mr. Mena?
Thank you. Dr. Matthews, a quick question. You had mentioned if we had a student that that tested positive, they would be asked or forced, I guess, to go into quarantine for 14 days. Obviously, we're talking about an in-class student, not a virtual student. So are we? What's the plan for that particular student? I mean, obviously, at that point, they can't switch to virtual learning, right? So what do we do with them?
We are working on the plan that they would continue to receive instruction, and it would be in a virtual way. So the question that we're trying to sort through is, do we roll them into a virtual classroom that's already established, or would the expectation be that the in-person teacher would continue to support that student in a virtual way over the course of those 14 days?
I mean, if a student has to go out, we're going to do everything that we can to keep them there. And I wish the world could see what I've seen the past 4 months, which are our teachers. They will, I am certain, communicate with whoever the virtual teacher is in the transition to make sure that that student is attended to. Also, the work that Shaylee Patel has led around virtual IEPs, the work that Ms. Hoppenstedt has led around 504s, doing everything we can within reason to attend to those needs as well. So I think that's a great question, Willie, and that's a question I've been asked quite a bit, which is, so what happens if my son or daughter's class gets quarantined for 2 weeks? Does that mean they're out of luck? And absolutely not. We will continue.
I do think it's important to note that according to at least Oakland County Health guidance at this point, is that even if there is a positive within a classroom, really the only people who have to quarantine would be those who came in direct close contact, which is at 6 feet face-to-face for an extended period of time, which is 15 minutes or more. And so it wouldn't be the whole class that would have to quarantine. It would be, and that's why the assigned seats are important, so that we know who's around the person, all those kinds of things.
Mrs. Murphy, go ahead.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute.
Oh, that's
myself.
okay.
Okay, so I just had kind of a quick thing that kind of came to my mind, and this is something maybe to ask, maintenance or something at some point. So, because I understand air circulation's an issue, filters, things like that. So, I don't know that I see anything specific on there, but I think it might be helpful. I know that other communications I've gotten from other like gyms and things like that talk about what they're doing about those aspects as well. To make sure that air circulation is better in their buildings. I know that we're supposed to keep our doors closed from a legal standpoint. So what happens?
So we have talked with Mike Dragoo, who is our director of maintenance, about the air in the buildings, and currently the percentage of air that we bring in from the outside recirculates air a certain number of times during the day. We're going to increase that the percentage so that the air is exchanged more frequently. We have great filtering system, kind of a result of a lot of the bond work that we've done. So we have great confidence that the air flow in buildings will be good. You bring up the question of doors and windows. Some of the guidance that's been given kind of stands in contrast to the safety guidance that we've been developed over the last several years. Closed windows, closed doors, and so we're working through that. It may be that we keep interior doors open as opposed to closed and locked to prevent students from touching the doorknobs all the time and having to clean those on a regular basis because frankly we don't have the custodial staff that can go through the building and clean those every hour, and so maybe we would keep those interior doors open and that might help the airflow as well. But we are attending to that, and a parent has asked that, and that will be one of the questions that we answer for parents.
Thank you. Mrs. Roney?
Okay, I had to unmute myself. First, I want to thank Dr. Weber, Dr. Matthews, Dr. Kinzer. I have a lot of close personal friends that are teaching in the Utica Community School District, and I have heard their woes. And so it just makes my heart happy that you guys all, you're taking into so many opinions on this back to school plan, that it's not, being dictated from the top down. We're listening to lots of people. So that's very nice. As far as filters, I work in an office building and we have upgraded our filters. I'm sure that's probably in your plan. There's filters that you can get that take out more particles. As far as what Dr. Weber said, yes, we do have people that move here because of our school system. They want to be in Novi because of the school system. So, let's keep that. And then, Willie, you had mentioned about, what happens if somebody gets COVID in a classroom. And I've been researching, and it's a very, very small percentage of kids that will attract this. They're more likely to get this from an adult, and bring it into the classroom. And so then passing it to each other is, small. So, I know we've got a plan, and I think it'll be a very good one, because I don't think we'll see a lot of that happening. I feel we're, doing so much more than a lot of school districts are. And I feel very good to be on this board at this time. Even though it's a difficult one, I think we're doing a great job.
Thank you, Marianne.
So again, we will share this information with the board tomorrow. We would encourage you to ask questions. These will not be all the questions that have been asked, and some of the questions may not have answers tomorrow, and that means we're still working on them. The goal is for this first run on July 21st to be able to answer these questions, and then get some feedback and perhaps revise some of these answers, but also to answer another series of questions on the 28th. I would just reinforce that I understand Mr. Cook's perspective that the board makes decisions for the district, and that's why we wanted to bring this to you. That the timing was very difficult to get this to the board before we shared it with parents, and we told parents that it's a work in progress. Because the governor didn't give her guidance till June 30th, and the next time that we met as a board was tonight. And so that's why we're having this discussion tonight, and that's why we will carve out lots of time on August 6th for us to have this discussion as well, so that before you approve any plan, you feel very comfortable with what we're doing.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. We appreciate you. Next, we have our budget update.
And the budget update is brief. I shared with you a spreadsheet that shows some of the targets that were established for the 2021 budget, as far as the reductions in the kind of the salary buckets and reductions in the non-salary buckets. But the truth is, we still don't know what our target really is, because we don't have an answer from the state of Michigan as to what our 2021 budget will be. We also don't have a clear answer as to what the ending of our 1920 budget is as well, even though there appears to be a framework in place that reduces the per pupil allocation by about $180 per student. But then on the other side of that, there's an increase in some of the CARES money to districts. It appears they're reducing by $1 and increasing by $2, but it's very unclear at this point. So we just wanted to continue to have this as a tickler for the board, that this is an ongoing discussion that we're having, that we really are proceeding with plans, but we're also being cautious because just this week we heard, for example, that the U.S. Senate may be moving a bill that would provide relief to districts as they look to open in the fall. And so all of these things coming together, we just don't know the answers, but we're continuing to monitor. Getting Mr. McIntyre on board will help us do that, although Ms. Wheeler's been doing a tremendous job helping us navigate through this. But we just wanted the board to be aware of some of those targets, with the understanding that those targets may shift as we get more clarity on what our final budget will be for 2021.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. Mr. Mena?
Dr. Matthews, what effect do all of these plans in the fall that we have affect the 2020-2021 budget?
The plans there is an expense to the plans. For example, the disinfectant, the wipes, the cleaning that we're going to do, the upgraded filters, for example, all those kinds of things, the mask that we're going to have for students to wear. We got on top of that early, and we've been keeping a spreadsheet of how much all of those expenses are. And the hope is that we're going to get reimbursed for those expenses, although there is no guarantee at this point. But there is an expense to preparing for school for the fall that we have not had in the past years.
Is there any areas of savings as a result?
There will be some areas of savings. For example, there probably will not be as many field trips that will require busing in the fall as we've had in the past. So that is a savings in transportation, for example. We're going to try and reduce the amount of paper that we use, because if everything, even in class, we don't want kids sharing paper necessarily. So we're going to use the technology that we have in our buildings and our computer carts and those kinds of things for students to use it in a virtual or a kind of an online way, so that we don't have to print as much. So there will be some savings, but the expenses far outweigh the savings at this point.
One thing, a question that I had from a community member was around professional development for teachers. Yeah. And they said that they saw that in one place we're not going to be engaging in professional development, yet another we did. And really, that we have 6 days set in our calendar for next year where we do not have to pay for guest teachers, because those days will be days that the kids would be home. And that will be really the threshold of our professional development. So that's about $160,000 savings in guest teacher costs. But as Dr. Matthews and Mike Dragoo and Dr. Kinzer and I were in a meeting yesterday, just wipes alone, yikes.
Yeah. So the savings in guest teachers, we think will be somewhat significant, because we won't be doing that during the school year. We'll be using those calendar days. And so, as I said, there are some savings, but the costs far exceed the savings.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other comments, I think we're ready to move on. Oh, Mrs. Murphy's raising her hand.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify. This is just for our information to keep us posted on the budget,
Right.
because like pretty much, can we expect maybe this kind of at every meeting, just a basic budget update? So if we do
Yes.
have any questions, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have our policy updates and revisions.
Thank you, Dr. Ruskin. We do have policy recommendations that were brought to the policy committee. These are recommended to us through Lusk Albertson, having been discussed in the policy committee. So policy 6011, naming school district buildings and facilities. The governance and policy committee is recommending that the words facility and facilities be added to the first sentence and last sentence respectively, so that it is consistent with the verbiage in the policy title, buildings and facilities. Bylaw 1001, conflict of interest. This is a policy revision of our organizational and functioning of the board. In this revision, the definition of relative is being defined more in depth, adding spouse, step or half family members, mother, father, son, daughter, brother, and sister. Bylaw 1002, special meetings. The first recommendation comes to ensure compliance with the Michigan Open Meetings Act 15.261, changing the notice of special meeting from 24 hours before the meeting to 18 hours before the meeting. The second recommendation is to meeting procedures, remote participation. The recommendation is to add the following language to remote participation. Board members, including those who are absent due to military duty, may participate in meetings remotely on the following conditions. At least a quorum of the board members are present for the board meeting. Any absent board member discloses a reason for his or her absence and the location from which he or she is participating. The absent board meeting may hear and be heard by other board members and those in attendance at the board meeting. The absent board member notifies the board president of his or her anticipated absence at least 3 business days before the meeting, so the board president may make arrangements to notify the general public of the means by which it may contact the board member prior to the meeting. And the board president takes steps to ensure the general public is aware of the manner any absent board member voted on any or all matters brought before the board for a vote, such as requiring roll call voting. And we do many of those currently. Policy 2006, students, curriculum, attendance, and truancy. The recommendation is to add stronger language to the attendance and truancy policy. The recommended language is the school district requires its students to attend school every day school is in session, except when excused by the school district. The school building's principal is responsible for enforcing this policy. In cases where the school building's principal concludes a parent's failing to comply with Michigan's compulsory school attendance law, she or he may refer the matter to Child Protective Services or the appropriate police agency or prosecutor's office. And then policy 4002, personnel nepotism. The recommendation is to add the same in-depth definition to relative as was recommended for bylaw 1001. That is being adding spouse, step or half family members, mother, father, son, daughter, brother, and sister. So these are presented for information and discussion tonight. And if you have any questions on those, you can reach out to me or Ms. Holly or any member of the policy committee, and we could give you some background, but we would bring these back to the board on August 6th for approval.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like no further discussion in regards to this. Mr. Mena?
Okay. With regards to policy 6011, I think there And I don't know if this is something that we're planning on bringing back at a future board meeting, but has been some discussions about potentially naming some of these facilities after some longtime coaches. And we did talk about this during the policy committee meeting recently. Currently, the way the policy reads, in fact, I think all we're asking to do at this point is just to add some clarification. But I think there is a request that's bubbling up to see if maybe we would actually reconsider how this was written in order for us to allow naming of some buildings. And I think the board all received the request from a community member who's heavily involved in wanting to move forward with some of these naming things. So I was looking maybe for you, Paul, or Danielle, to let us know if there is a plan to bring that forward at a future meeting.
So the plan in place currently, and Dr. Matthews can help with this, or Paul, you can pipe in, was to get the policy clarified because currently it didn't match the title and the verbiage. So that was the priority, I believe, of the committee. The community member sent a proposal, if you will, to the entire board. And my plan was to reach out to that community member and let him know what the policy currently states, and potentially offer some alternative options besides facility and building namings. If you would like us to have further discussion, we certainly at our future meeting, we can put back on the agenda a policy committee discussion, and we can specifically discuss that proposal. Mr. Cook,
I was just curious if there was a plan around that, that's all.
I was just going to respond to the community member directly to clarify the current policy that we at the policy committee agreed on. Mr. Cook, do you have any additional information?
No, I was actually going to talk a little bit about under committee reports, but now's probably is a better time. But yeah, it was the main discussion here was the clarification, and so that the title of the policy and the verbiage of the policy matched, and then it also does match what our practice has been, if we want to discuss this further, yeah, I think we can discuss it in the committee. We did actually discuss some of it in the committee, but we can have a deeper discussion and come out with a more in-depth recommendation at that time.
Okay. You're muted, Danielle.
We can't.
I am?
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, if there's any further questions or comments, please forward them to Dr. Matthews, and he will send them out to the whole board so that we can continue to communicate on these. Okay. Next, we have our second opportunity for comments from the audience.
There were no additional non-agenda item comments.
Thank you. And we have the superintendent's report. Dr. Matthews.
I have no report this evening.
Okay. And our administrative report, Dr. Kinzer.
In light of the late hour, I will pass in my report this evening as well.
Thank you. Dr. Weber.
Yeah, I can't. So we had 3 of our Novi students, 1 a current high school student, and 2 alumni helped to lead a national conference today put on by the American Institute of Architects around student voice and student agency. They did a phenomenal job and made Novi super duper proud. So a big shout out to Suniti and Marina and Megan. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. Next, we have board communication. Mrs. Hood? No? Okay.
No, I don't have anything.
Oh, I just thought I saw you're unmuted, so I assumed that you did. I'm sorry. Mrs. Murphy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick, I've really found it the 21-day challenge that the staff put together on social anti-racism. I don't know exactly what the name of it was. The challenge that got shared with everyone. It's been interesting listening, and things are short. So that's really, many of the little snippets and videos that they're sending are very short, but definitely giving a wide range of different stories. And for me, I think it's just been really, it's been added some value, especially to this time of being home with COVID and hearing other people's stories and kind of making those connections, even if it's virtually. So I just want to thank the group that put that together and worked on that so that it would be personalized for Novi schools, which I thought was, a very valuable thing to do, because obviously we have a lot of diversity in our schools, to kind of to tailor it to us. So I just want to thank those folks for putting it together and to sharing it with all of us. So
Thank you, Mrs. Murphy.
mhm.
Any other board communication? No? Okay, I just wanted to thank Mrs. Wheeler for all the work she's done and the extra job she's taken on over the last, I think, 5-ish weeks since Ms. Minnick has left the district. We look forward to welcoming Mr. McIntyre. And I also just want to reiterate and echo what Darby said, that sometimes, earlier we had a lot of public comment, which we all encourage and support here at the board. We want to hear from our community, but sometimes it can initiate a response of defensiveness. But I think after we all take a deep breath and reflect, it really just opens up opportunity. And I think that we all feel that way, that anytime we get to hear someone else's opinion or voice or comment besides our own thoughts, that we then have an opportunity to reflect and continue to have really, in my opinion, tough conversations. But that is the only way that work can get accomplished. So I appreciate our community members putting in thoughtful time and energy to ask questions, both on the social justice and anti-racism comments, but also on the ROAR plan, because these are very important decisions being made about our students, which is the reason that we're all here. So I just wanted to say that, and please make that comment and public forum open so that we continue to talk. Mrs. Roney, I see you kind of raising your hand.
Well, it's funny because while they were doing this, I was texting my kids, because both having gone through the high school, but never mentioning anything about this. And so I'm like, was there, and they've confirmed this, which shocks me that it would actually be there. So I was surprised. So that's all I have to say. I was just shocked at some of the stuff that these kids actually said that, were actually there. So.
And again, thank you for everybody having an open heart and an open mind to listening, because it takes a brave person to come to a public meeting and have conversations, especially the tough ones. So that's what we're here for. And we appreciate everyone's commitment to our students and our district to do better, but more importantly, just to ask questions and be open and inviting to working together. I don't see anyone else's comments. So Mr. Smith has his thumbs up. We appreciate you. He's not going to talk. He's tired. Okay, so if there are no more board communication comments, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Adjourn.
We have all 7 board members who want to make a recommendation and make a support, but I will say Mr. Mena made the recommendation and Mr. Smith made the support. If we can have a roll call vote, Mr. Mena?
Trustee Cook?
Yes.
Trustee Hood?
Yes.
Trustee Mena? Yes. Trustee Murphy?
Yes.